Good morning. Notice of the time and place of these committee meetings was publicized by notifying the area news media, by publicizing same in the Omaha World Herald and the Nebraska Press Association, OPPD Outlets newsletter, OPPD.com, and social media. By displaying such notice on the first level of OPPD administrative offices and by emailing such notice to each of the district's directors on April 10th, 2026. Thank you all for joining us. As a reminder to those joining us on WebEx, please mute your microphones to reduce background noise. To members of the public, thank you for attending. You are in listen only mode. If you have any technology questions, please use the chat feature in WebEx to communicate with the event host. We'll take public comments at the end of today's meeting as well at the board meeting on April 16th, 2026. That meeting will be conducted in person at the Omaha Douglas Civic Center and begin at 5 p.m. The public may attend in person or remotely via WebEx by going to OPPD.com. Joining me today in person are my fellow board members, Amanda Bogner, Mike Kavanaugh, Sarah Howard, John Hudson, Craig Moody, Mary Spurgeon, and Eric Williams. We'll also have members of our executive leadership team, Steve Bruckner with the Fraser Stryker Law Firm, our general counsel, and OPPD staff. Additionally, we currently have nine attendees in this meeting consisting of OPPD employees and members of the public. We'll begin with committee reports today and a review of board work plan items presented by the following directors. Director Bogner will present on risk, Director Spurgeon on governance, Director Williams on system management and nuclear oversight, Director Howard on customer and public engagement, and Director Moody on finance. Following those committee reports, we'll move into presentations on financial stewardship, oversight and monitoring, and governance and board matters. After that, we'll conclude the day with public comments on items of district business. And Josh Clark, will you please give the safety briefing?
Good morning, everyone. Because safety is our top priority, we begin each meeting with a few physical, cybersecurity, and psychological safety reminders. Hopefully, if anyone's not feeling well, they're not here today, they're at home, staying hydrated, getting rest, and seeking medical attention if needed. We want to be aware of all of our emergency exits, which we have one to the rear of us and also one to the front of us. Also be aware that we have first aid equipment, AED, and fire suppression materials directly outside of the door and then in possession with some of the security officers that are directly outside as well. In the event of any type of severe weather, what we'll do is we'll exit right through these doors. We'll go to the security desk and follow their directions to go into a storm shelter. Thankfully, I don't think we have to worry about that today. If the building were to be evacuated for any reason, we'd use our emergency exits, and then I'd ask everyone to kind of head towards the north parking lot there where we'll congregate and take accountability of everyone to make sure everyone's safe. Always keep your area free of any slip trips or other types of fall hazards. Be ready in the event of an emergency and follow the directions of OPPD staff in the room. If anybody needs any help, just go ahead and speak up. We'll get you help as quickly as possible. Be cautious with any suspicious emails or unknown links that you get. Those are heavy and coming more and more in today's age, so always be careful of that. Also watch out for spam calls and text messages. Those are always something that be wary of, and if you don't know the number calling you, it's probably a good idea not to answer or just wait to see what that voicemail is as well. Don't click anything that seems untrustworthy. Those of us in OPPD, we have a fish alert button on our Outlook system that we use. And then again, identify unknown phone numbers during any type of virtual meeting. Psychological safety is essential for productive collaboration. We encourage curiosity and continuous learning. We want people to speak and act with respect. We embrace constructive conflict. We value diverse perspectives. We build trust through transparency, and we want to give everyone a voice and invite questions and ideas. And as always, here at OPPD, remember our core values: passion to serve, we honor our community, and we care for one another. So thank you very much and have a good meeting.
Thank you, Josh. And if I may just quickly, I think on the cybersecurity front, I would be remiss if I didn't mention with the geopolitical conflicts and attacks that are happening around the world, we are in heightened alert for cybersecurity. So I'm going to double down on the awareness for not only clicking on emails, but anything that looks suspicious from a cybersecurity, physical security. If you see something, say something. And this is something that we've been promoting a lot lately with our OPPD employees.
Thank you. Now we'll have committee reports starting with risk. Director Bogner.
Thank you very much. The risk committee met on March 19th, and all directors were present. We had two guests from outside of the district join us, Amy Schreck and Colby Jensen with Forvis Mazars joined us. So after receiving a safety briefing and review of prior quarter action items, we moved into reviewing the committee charter. We did talk about 4 specific revisions that we'll review later today and have an action item associated with that. We also received a couple reports related to strategic risk. One of those really focused around the Iran conflict and how it affects our cybersecurity posture, as President Fernandez mentioned in his opening, along with supply chain management, energy, fuel, and commodity perspective. And we had a good conversation, and committee members asked several questions around that. Then we moved on to audits and control oversight, where we received the 2026 audit update. We also received the 2025 annual report review from Ms. Laura Langford, where we review the district's financial position and performance throughout 2025. Then we ended with Forvis Mazars annual audit and credit agreement compliance, where they walked us through their clean opinion on the annual report, and our committee was afforded the opportunity to ask several questions. And then following that, we were able to have the committee members and Forvis Mazars personnel were able to have a question and answer session after all the OPPD employees departed. So would any of my committee members like to add anything to my report? All right, with that, I rest.
Awesome, thank you. Director Spurgeon.
Thank you, Chair Clore. Following our safety briefing, we had a presentation by President Fernandez regarding a human capital appointment and compensation. So we reviewed that, some questions answered. Then we reviewed the pre-committee action items that had been accomplished. Ethics reporting, I was able to report that no violations of ethics had on the part of the board of directors had been received. And 5, governance and board policy review. I invited our governance committee members to review BL1A, OPPD officer relationships, BL5, unity of control, BL6, president and CEO's performance evaluation, and BL7, delegation to the president and CEO. And I'm going to assume that all directors have logged onto the governance pre-committee meeting and diligent and have read through those as well as part of their review of governance policies. So as you see on the screen, 2 questions were asked and answered, and I do have some suggestions for revision for us to consider probably at the board workshop, one of the policies. If any directors have, after reading those, also have concerns or, gee, we should take a look at one of these board policies a little more closely, please send me an email or ask for a phone conversation so that I can record that and we can do that. Following that, we had a legislative update, which we're also going to have here a little later this morning. We had a very brief discussion of merit and market compensation. So we'll be looking at that more closely at our May meeting. That's just kind of to tee that up. Following a look at the governance committee planning calendar, just a look ahead to see what was likely to be happening in the May meeting. Things change, but that's one. Looked at the board work plan, at which time I continue to feel inadequate because one of them, for which I'm partially responsible, continues to have been neglected, but nice to have that reminder. Following a summary of meeting by the jury, we really had very little time, so we concluded pretty shortly after that. Governance committee members, have I missed anything? Anything you would like to add? Okay, governance rest then. Thank you, Chair Paul.
Great, thank you. Director Williams.
Great, thanks very much. The Systems Committee did meet as well, March 30th, agenda on the screen. We talked through several topics. These meetings have been long, but we're getting a lot discussed and move forward. We talked about real property, let's see, real property and land management. And this is related to timeline and status update related to Energy Plaza. Next, we talked about nuclear decommissioning at Fort Calhoun Station. And the report, as always, was wonderful from Tim Muelling. It focused on the project being fully funded and remaining on schedule. So I appreciate that continued dedication from everybody involved. We had a discussion of major projects, and that included work under construction for major transmission projects. And there are a number of different updates happening, including some community meetings today and tomorrow related to the transmission project. So community outreach related to those projects continues as well. We talked about SD4 reliability monitoring report, and that is on the agenda today. So we'll get to that a little bit later. We looked backward at Winter Storm Fern, and we had kind of a summary of the financial impacts and lessons learned from this storm. And mostly that was a focus on the way in which we have learned from past storms and the improvements that we've made, excuse me, for the reliability of our equipment and the way that OPPD responds during challenging external weather circumstances. So again, kudos to everybody who was involved in helping to make sure that that was as successful an event for us as it could be. We discussed Nebraska City Generation Station, and this was a follow-up to the dust collector incident that occurred last year. And so there was some actions taken since that time, and the committee members were made aware of what has happened in the past and what we are going to do moving forward. Again, how we've learned from past actions and how we'll continue to improve. We received an update on the Integrated Systems Plan, ISP, and specifically the summary of the March 24th workshop that has already happened, and look forward toward the May 14th workshop number 2 that is currently scheduled. And that information is available online for anybody who's looking to be involved. We discussed the local electric grid planning according to resolution 6744 from December of 2025, specifically related to the concept of distributed capacity procurement and how those types of projects can benefit grid reliability, energy demand, and customer affordability. There was an additional discussion with other board members, and continued discussions are anticipated to lead to next steps in the coming months to move that project forward. So we'll anticipate hearing more when we have clarity on what the most appropriate steps are to take in line with the resolution. There are some additional items I think that will be on the agenda later today, but that's it for what was discussed at the committee meeting. We similarly ran out of time at the end and did not have sufficient time for additional open discussion. So that's something I think we continue to work on because I do feel it's important, but we keep running into agendas that are relatively long, numerous topics. And so something I'll work on with the committee so that we have that kind of open space to discuss other things that are not specifically on the agenda. Do any of the systems committee members have any additional comments that were not included? I think you'd like to share from that meeting? Saying none, that's it for systems. Back to you, Chair.
Thank you, Director Howard.
Yes, the Customer and Public Engagement Committee met on April 6th, and after our safety briefing, we had a legislative update. We went over the SD5 customer satisfaction monitoring report, and we discussed the stakeholder engagement for the integrated systems plan. And we had a timely meeting. We did not go over at all. And do any other committee members have anything to add? I'm guessing no. Okay, that's it.
Great, thank you. Director Moody, please.
Thank you, Chair Core. The Finance Committee met in full on April 2nd. All members were present. A few things to highlight for you colleagues. Item number 3, Director Williams covered, so we heard the same update there. Item 4, we're going to get here shortly, so tee that up. Item 5, Director Williams also covered an SNNO. The remainder, items 6, 7, 8, and 9 are all on our agenda for today, as is item 10, which leads me to item 11, an update for you here. So we had a discussion about potential updates to SD2. So a few things to note here. I think there are reasonable questions to be asked about whether or not the goal that we have set for X% below the regional average is appropriate given how we're performing as a district, both in terms of as compared to the national average, but also that peer set, which then begs the question, is the peer set correct? So we took a bit of a walk down memory lane, which was really nice. all the way going back to 21, 22, it was noted that there were 18 months of continuous analysis, and it was on the agenda for 12 of 18 months there. So a lot of work went into that back in those days. And so we got kind of brought up to speed on what the nature and focus of those conversations were at the particular time. Some of you may recall that that ended in a adjustment to the peer set that we use to measure our regional performance. We then started to talk about and get a view into what some of the forthcoming conversations are going to be. So examining, what the different generation mixes might mean, ownership type, whether it's an IOU, public power, consumption patterns, et cetera, et cetera. So as you might imagine, there's a reason why it was an 18 months discussion. It's because it's very complex, and zeroing in on exactly which peer set makes the most sense, and then determining what's the right target for us to set are complex conversations. And so this is really sort of setting the stage for further conversation that's going to start in finance in the coming month. And then naturally, as we always do, when we start to make adjustments to strategic directives, we'll begin to engage the full board once the finance committee feels like it has something that's worthwhile for us to really dig into. So more coming on that. It was a really good conversation, and I think we're poised to really dig into it in a good way in the coming months. Beyond that, nothing more to report. Finance committee members, anything that I missed, and other colleagues, any questions? All right, back to you, Director Core.
Awesome, thank you. We'll move to Mr. Underwood, please.
Great, we have a report on the biennial report, rates report. And so for those that remember, as Ms. Well makes her way up, this was kind of the vision casting. Every 2 years, we try and take a look at what kind of rate work we'd like to do. The board gives us feedback on where they'd like to see us go and things they'd like to see us look at. And we make suggestions on things we'd like them to consider changing. And so Beth is here to recap that for us. So that's our Director of Financial Planning and Analysis. If that's helpful, Beth.
Good morning. So today I'm providing our biennial reports on rates update, which outlines the major pricing and rates initiatives planned for the next 2 years and ensures that the board has clear visibility into our upcoming work, key decisions and timelines. This biennial report serves 3 main purposes. It provides clarity into the pricing and rates work plan, reinforces transparency in our long-term pricing strategy so there are no surprises when we evaluate adjustments, and establishes a predictable 2-year outlook that assigns analysis, board discussion, and implementation. So together, the strategy really supports stability, predictability, and a clear understanding of what decisions are coming and when. Next slide. So turning to the 2026 work plan, this summarizes the rate initiatives needing board engagement over the next year. We begin with Strategic Directive 2 rates, where we're evaluating the 2022 regional redefinition and percent below target adjustments and looking at if they produced the outcomes that we expected. We did start these discussions this month and we'll continue them in the upcoming months. If the Finance Committee recommends a change to ST2, that would come to all committee and board approval, which is to be determined at this time. The next 3 initiatives would require board approval this year. The first is the updates to the service regulations, and this is to clarify OPPDs and the customer's roles and responsibilities regarding access to meter equipment as well as resale of electric service. I know I have August up there as the timing. However, we are actually finalizing these changes to the service regulations and working on bringing those forward potentially in May. The time varying rate pilot, which includes a proposed new residential TOU rate pilot, we're going to present that to the Finance Committee in August. And then this rate would be approved by the board with the COP and rate action in December. The next is the irrigation rate, rate 226. We're specifically analyzing Brattle's recommendation that was done in their assessment of our current rates and riders to remove the phase distinction. After we complete the analysis, we'll bring our recommendation forward to the Finance Committee in August. And if changes are recommended, we would look for approval in December, also with the COP and rate action. And then in September, we're going to bring forward the monthly service charge evaluation for our non-residential rate classes. No rate action will be needed this year. This is just an evaluation, and then we'll report out on the findings to the Finance Committee in September. Next slide. We also have broader fee evaluations underway. We're assessing the potential implementation of a credit and debit card fee to recover merchant processing costs, and also a paper bill fee to recover printing and mailing costs and promote digital adoption. We're currently looking at industry best practices for these and also customer impacts, and we'll bring these forward when we have more information to the Finance Committee. And next, the team is researching a storm recovery mechanism, especially given future uncertainty related to FEMA reimbursements. This would work a lot like our fuel and purchase power adjustment, where we would use regulatory accounting to collect those costs from customers in future years. And then lastly, in 2026, we're developing a 10-year revenue projection for our SPP transmission tariff to account for transmission projects that are eligible for SPP load sharing. And then looking ahead to 2027, two major initiatives are planned. First, the standby strategy. Again, this is based on Brattle's assessment. We're going to explore the creation of a new standby rate that is seasonally differentiated and contingent on customer generation. And then second, the avoided cost study, which will examine the final SPP policy changes and assess whether adjustments to riders or programs are warranted. And this ensures that our offerings remain aligned with evolving market rules and cost structures. And we'll bring those items to the board action for board action once the analysis is completed in 2027. So in summary, our upcoming rate work is aligned to provide transparency and predictability. You'll see a steady cadence of items come to the board, particularly in mid to late 2026. And we're also laying that foundational work that sets the stage for decisions in 2027. And with that, I'll open it up for questions.
Beth, if we could back up a slide, I'm curious about the storm recovery mechanism. And could you put that into greater context and help us understand what the trend is there and whether or not we've been experiencing an inability to recover from storms? Is it not happening? Is it slowing down? Is it just more paperwork? Is it lack of funding?
Yeah, so we have been fortunate where we have received FEMA reimbursements for the large storms that we have had over the past few years. There's the concern that FEMA reimbursement might not continue into future years, and we don't have a mechanism right now to recover storm costs. We currently do not budget for storms. We don't want to raise rates in case a storm happens, and so it's one of those kind of afterthoughts. This would give us the ability that if we did have a large storm, like the March 2025 storm or the July 2024 storm, tens of millions of dollars, if we were not reimbursed by FEMA, we could collect those costs from customers in future years.
And if I may, I think just providing a little bit of context, this is 7 or 8 years ago when I was CFO. We talked about a lot about this and the need for us to potentially carry higher reserves to meet these type of obligations. Right now, we have made the conscious decision not to increase the level of reserves and liquidity for these reasons, but that could be another mechanism, not only to recover the expenses that happened already, recover them retroactively, but potentially increase the level of reserves if FEMA reimbursements or recoveries seem to be at risk. I don't think we have any clarity right now.
I think part of what I heard in your question, sir, is kind of the magnitude of this issue for us. And if you just think of the recent floods, the 3 major polar vortexes, this is becoming more mainstream to the impact of our financials. And I think what Beth is posing is a structure that more properly represents that, as opposed to asking the organization just defer a whole bunch of things that you plan to do and make this fit. And so I think that's also part of this conversation.
So I think that's kind of where my next question was going to be, absent a mechanism to do that and absent FEMA, then we're left at the end of the year to dip into the rate stabilization fund to make adjustments to what our corporate operating plan the following year. Like, those are the tools that we have to address that. Yeah.
Correct.
Okay.
And I think the other thing from a customer experience perspective is if you can see it on the bill, you understand the costs the district is having to carry to deal with that kind of issue. And so from a clarity perspective, it's also a little bit more transparent.
So it would be something that would go up or down in any given year, depending upon the magnitude of the storms, the financial impact of this.
Yeah, consistent with whatever formula the board may approve.
Right, okay.
I noticed on the previous slide here, the service regulations update, you anticipate bringing that forward more quickly than is indicated on this. But does that have to do with the laws that were passed in the unicameral
No.
recently, or is it something as part of?
No, so in the original, when I brought this forward to the finance committee in March, I think we had May as the timeline. We wanted to evaluate a couple other sections within the service regulations, so I pushed it back to August. I think we have clarity on what those changes should be, and so that's the timing change.
All right, thank you.
Yep.
The irrigation rate, can you tell me what the phase distinction is? Just real quick summary.
Yeah, yes. So we charge irrigation customers by horsepower charge. And that is differentiated between a single phase service and being fed from a 3-phase service. And so we're going to look at if there is a true distinction and a true cost difference between those phases.
Got it. So that change seems like it might impact specific people more than others, and other potential impacts or changes to structures of time varying rate pilot, the standby strategy in all of these categories. Do we have a general sense of how those would be rolled in the future? Is it going to be mandatory for everybody who was on that in the past to now be switched into the new rate? Is there a ability to remain on the existing rate for a short period while you evaluate what the potential impacts would be for a change in the future? What do we anticipate about the changeover in areas that we have several considered?
That's something that we would evaluate when we're kind of going through, especially with the irrigation rate. Would that take effect January 1st of 2027? Would we give customers more notice than that? We could outdate that effective date if possible. The other option that we do have is kind of grandfathering customers in. For our standby rider 464, there's only a few customers on that would be impacted. And so we would look at that as well, of how those customers would be impacted by any changes.
Standby riders in the next slide, right? And I heard that described it, yeah. Oh, maybe one
Previous slide.
Well, wherever it is. I heard the description about seasonally differentiated and also related to distributed generation on site or generation assets on site. Can you describe what specifically that means? Is this individuals with solar on their home, or is this large customers with generators behind the meter?
It's more large customers with generators behind the meter. We don't have a distinction between what kind of generation that they have and should we take that into consideration.
Got it. Great. Thanks very much.
Yep. Thank you.
Not on the board work plan, but I think I want to take the opportunity as the chair of the committee to talk about some of the conversations we've been having around exploring whether or not a hyperscaler rate class makes any sense. Quick update and next steps. As all of you know, colleagues, I reached out to you directly and one-on-one to try and understand as it relates to this question at hand, what is it that you're interested in exploring? And so I got responses from everybody, which is great. Thank you for participating. I synthesized those and provided them back to you. I also provided that to the executive leadership team so that, because they had been asking me, like, help us understand what the board is after here. So that revealed a lot of alignment around the questions that we're asking, which is good, right? Like, we don't want to spend a lot of time exploring this question if we're not generally curious about it, to understand what impact hyperscalers are having on our system and on our customer owners. So I think it for me sort of slid into place. Yes, we should continue to explore this, which I think leads to kind of the next step, which I'm going to look to you, Mr. McAree. Generally speaking, I think the board does a good job of making sure that it understands issues before it takes action. And this is another good example where we want to do that. So there's maybe tee you up, Tim, to talk about kind of the next steps in terms of raising our understanding and awareness of this issue before we decide to make any policy decisions.
Yeah, certainly, Director Moody, thank you for that. So we've been contemplating for a while, both locally and we know nationally, this discussion is very prominent around the growth of data centers and in particular AI and the impact it has on the energy grid. And that's true here as well. So we are working through specifically some content to share with the board. It will include customer specific information. So we'll have to handle that appropriately and how it's presented to the board. But to help broaden our understanding and establish a more consistent and robust set of facts around the types of data centers, the industry writ large, as well as the impacts here in our service territory. And we think that that information will be crucial to the board as you contemplate and as we contemplate with management, any adjustments to accommodate that predictable future that might be necessary.
Okay, so thank you for that. That's coming. Could you, any sense for a timeline on it?
We're currently talking about the May and June cycle, both. There's a lot of content that we feel it's important to share, so it will probably take that sort of time frame.
Okay. As part of committee meetings? Sorry, this isn't a week. I just want to make sure.
No, that we're candidly what we're targeting based on the time is closed sessions in each of those two, because all those segments will contain customer confidential information.
Got it. So all 8 of us, all committed.
That's the intent as it's shaping up right now.
Great. Thank you for that. That's super helpful. I want to remind everyone as well that the Finance Committee's kind of been poking on this for a little while now. We had Rattle come to a meeting, I think 2 or 3 months ago, where we asked some questions and got some insight from them on their perspective and what they're seeing in the market. So again, I think this really shapes us up well to raise our level of understanding, to give us an opportunity to ask questions, get clarity, and then what comes of that is still an open question. But I don't want to presuppose anything. Clearly, based on all of your responses, board members, this is something that we want to dig into. So we've got some good next steps in front of us. Sorry to co-op the rates work plan. I wanted to do it by noting that it's not part of the work plan today. We're going to do some education and then it may find its way.
And if I may just quickly, I
Yeah.
really appreciate the focus, because the industry is changing and it's great for us to continue to have this discussion. For the members of the public who are watching and you're wondering, hey, well, we've been serving hyperscalers for a while. How come you're just talking about this now? And then just to clarify, we have rates. We have our rates 261M that we've had for a while, and we've been managing that type of load for many years. So this is not new. I really welcome the renewed interest, and we will have an evolution, but just wanted to clarify for members of the public, we've been on top of these for many years, and we will continue to evolve and make these even better for the district.
To take that a step further, if I could, when Rattle was present, and I don't want to get over my skis here, so check me if you all have a different interpretation, but what they described in terms of options for creating rates and how you structure that is the way that we've structured 261M, which is to say a rate coupled with an energy services agreement is really a common good practice that we've had in place for a while, right? So to your point, it's not as though we're just kind of like hoping that we can navigate this until we get an answer. We've been navigating it for a while. Okay, thank you for that, Javier. Yeah, go ahead, Eric.
Just to follow up on the May and June discussion about closed session, I guess part of my interest is in how we can provide transparency and a clear understanding to the public, not about any specific information related to any individual customers, but we have 3 rate classes, but there is something like a 4th rate class hiding inside of our 3rd rate class that is rapidly growing to represent a portion of the overall load and energy that is what I would consider to be worthy of a public understanding. And so I guess I'm just interested in, after we have the closed session discussions, again, with appropriate sensitivity to information for individual customers, which we always offer that privacy to them, what can we do to make this information available so that people have a clear understanding of the way in which our system is changing, the way in which our customers are changing, and the way in which we're responding? And so I know that I've shared that with you, but I just want to be clear that, the closed session discussion, I'm glad to hear that information. I am also specifically interested in how can we make this more clear to people who are not in this room, will not be in those closed session discussions, and are interested in what are the impacts on this, enormous kind of economy-wide change that we are all experiencing. So I don't know if we have any ideas after the closed session. The next step would be rate action associated with the COP, or is there some version of information that we can present that clarifies, again, a sub rate class that is currently within industrial that we would be able to differentiate? That's, again, part of my interest. leading to policymaking is to have accurate information that both we understand and the public understands so that we can receive feedback about how we should take action. So I don't know if that is,
I can just make a comment about our intent, which I didn't articulate, but it's a good call, is we certainly recognize that this question is increasingly coming up from our customers, from general customers. So it's been our intention, Director Williams, to, I love your acknowledgement with acknowledgement for appropriate confidentiality elements, to be able to take something outwards to the public and customers in general, to reassure them what Javier reassured this board here. But we've taken action and we've been managing these large customers, I think, very well for a long time. So we've begun to form some ideas of what that could look like. And we anticipate the board can help inform that, what that public approach could look like. There's a lot of options there. But as we get through May and June, we're putting our focus on getting a good fact set and situational awareness for the board. And then we'll continue to develop what the public outreach might look like.
great, sounds good. Appreciate it.
Great question, Eric. Any other questions on that, colleagues?
Not a question, but
Yeah.
just real quick, I just want to say, Director Moody, Beth, Tim, thank you for the work on the time varying rate pilot. I have frequently expressed the desire to see this advanced, and I'm very glad to see we have a timeline and thanks very much to everybody involved.
No problem. Thank you.
Thanks, Beth.
My apologies, everyone, if I could make a quick interruption. I'm not for sure if you've seen across your phones or the computers, but I wanted to make you aware. There was an incident that occurred approximately an hour ago, just down the street on 72nd Street at the Walmart. Unfortunately, it involved a shooting of some type with a fatality and another person injured. However, Omaha Police Department put out the statement that there is no continued threat to the public. We are monitoring the situation. And mainly I bring it up just as you conclude your meeting today and you're leaving, you will want to avoid the area of 72nd and Pine. I expect there to be a heavy police presence there for the immediate future. So again, my apologies. Just want to make sure everyone's aware. We see no effects to any OPPD personnel or operations whatsoever. So thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Josh. Mr. Underwood, who do we have for the debt issuance?
We've got Mr. Thurber who will make his way to the podium. We're going to make a tweak to our debt issuance authorization request this time around, and John will highlight that, but we continue to be pretty much in the middle of the decade of build, as some of us has generally characterized that. That's required a substantial amount of senior lien debt issuance as well as other instruments. We're going to ask for approval for a shorter duration, and we hope to be more accurate in the volume that we aim for. And so John's going to profile that for us. So thanks, John.
Thank you, Vice President Underwood. I'm John Thurber, the Director of our Treasury and Financial Operations area. And as Brad mentioned, this is kind of an annual or semi-annual request for authorization to issue debt. And we have been doing this now really since the beginning of our generation projects here in the early 2020s and before that. And it really gives us the opportunity to issue debt when the market conditions warrant. As you'll see here, we're going to be looking at both new money and refunding. And sometimes market conditions change quickly. And so taking advantage of refunding opportunities is a benefit. And having this pre-authorization allows us to really do that on a timely basis. So we are requesting an authorization to issue up to 1.4 billion senior lien tax exempt bonds through next March 31st of 2027. And that really includes three major components. A little over $1 billion is for new money projects. Those are the capital projects that were discussed as part of the corporate operating plan here in November and December. And then we're also going to be borrowing about $100 million of what we call capitalized interest. What that is that allows us for the new generation projects that are under construction to actually, as part of the bond proceeds, borrow the interest and principal costs on those bonds until those new capital projects are actually running and we can get revenue from them. And so we're going to be borrowing about $100 million of debt service costs. And that'll take us through the end of 2028, the debt service on these bonds through the end of 2028. And then in 2029, when those facilities are available and running, we have revenue from them. We'll pay those debt service costs from rates. And then the last piece of this is about 279 million of what we call refunding opportunities. We currently have bonds that right now we could refund. And so that would cover part of that 279 million. And then in early 2027, there's another piece of bonds that we could refund at that point. And so that's the kind of the summation of the 1.4 billion. You'll note that in the corporate operating plan, we had asked for, or the corporate operating plan had indicated about 857 million of new debt in 2026. The 1.4 billion allows us to move part of that into 2027 and then also kind of spread out the debt issuance so that we don't end up having a debt issuance at the end of this year, early 2027, and then have one within a few months. So it's a little bit larger than what we had in the 2026 corporate operating plan. So with that, on the next slide, you'll see what our plans are. Right now, we're going to look at issuing debt fairly quickly, about $270 million worth of debt in the May-June timeframe. That's really to help support, and this issue particularly, supporting the new generation projects at Turtle Creek and Cass County. And then later in the year, about 370 million. Unsure whether that'll be in the December period or could roll into the first quarter of 2027. And those are really for other capital projects of the district. So two components. You'll note that that does not include the refunding elements of this. As we get closer to the debt issuance dates, and as we hear from our financial advisor about refunding opportunities, we'll add additional bond proceeds to cover any refunding opportunities that are available. So with that, I'll kind of go through where we are with coverage metrics. You'll look at debt service coverage and fixed charge coverage. You'll see where we ended up in 2025, again, very strong. And we project with the $1.4 billion authorization that we would still maintain very strong 2.0 times debt service coverage. And our fixed charge coverage, that's a metric that looks at both debt and then also fixed charges tied to PPA agreements. That's a metric that Standard & Poor's looks at pretty rigorously, and we're in a very strong position there for fixed charge coverage of 1.73 times. And if you look at the next slide, days cash on hand are another important metric that the rating agencies look at. We ended up the year in 2025 at 250 million. And then we project with this debt issuance that we'll end up the year with about 271 days of cash on hand. Again, a very strong metric, especially as we are building new generation. We're spending $100 million a month in capital. The metrics tied to liquidity and days cash on hand are very important, that we maintain strong metrics. So with that, we recommend, and this is also a recommendation from our financial advisor, Barclays, that that we receive board authorization to issue up to $1.4 billion of senior lien tax exempt debt, and that authorization would go through March 31st of 2027, the first quarter of next year. And it provides us the flexibility of going to the debt market when the conditions warrant. On authorization, we'll provide periodic updates. It looks like our first debt issuance will come very quickly, but we'll provide periodic updates on the authorization that's unused. And then, as we mentioned, or as I mentioned, the bonds are going to be used really to support our new generation projects, primarily at Turtle Creek and Cass County stations. We do have a small portion that's covering other capital expenditures. It supports our liquidity needs, and it gives us the opportunity to refund debt and lower debt service costs. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
On the coverage graph, if we could go back to that.
Yeah.
I don't remember hearing the term fixed charge coverage before. Can you
Sure.
tease that out for me?
Yeah, and this has been a number of years ago. And this is a metric in particular that Standard and Poor's looks at. And that is a metric that says, okay, we have debt service on your new facilities, but they also noted that we have long-term contracts for power from other entities. And so what they look at is that they add those annual costs or half of those annual costs into a metric they call fixed charges. And so that's really kind of the fixed costs that we have to incur, the district has to incur, whether it's debt service costs on new generation or PPA agreements that we have for generation outside. And PPAs have become a big portion of OPPD's generation portfolio. And so it's something that we've been sharing with the rating agencies for probably around 10 years. And it's something that we look at. The range for a AA rated utility is between 1.6 and 1.8 times. So we're very strong in that range.
That was gonna be my next
Yeah.
question. Thank you.
You bet.
Are there other questions?
If there are no other questions, I want to take a moment to recognize Mr. Thurber for what you do, John, is incredibly important, especially in this time when we're busy building. And the treasury function has been incredibly important, and I rest at night knowing that you and your team continue to look after the financial health of the district. You've been doing this, you've been with the district for 42 years?
41 years.
41. Not quite. yet.
Not quite 42.
But I want to commend you for, for the dedication, the diligence that your team puts in, not only on the debt issuance, but also on the investment of our funds. And we're going to talk a little bit about our pension fund and retirement funds. So I just want to thank you for continuing to lead your teams and for everything that you've done for the district for 41 years.
Thank you, Javier.
Thank you. I think we're ready to move on to our next item, Mr. Underwood.
Great. This is a performance report on the retirement plan. So every year we report out on how the retirement plan did relative to active and passive management. We have a target yield that we want to hit. And so we track diligently both the performance of the managers in the fund and the aggregate yield of the assets to make sure we can fulfill our retirement obligations for those that have earned them. So John, we'll hear from you, and I think we'll hear from Mr. Busick, if I'm not mistaken.
That's right. Thank you again, Brad. Again, this is just the annual report that we provide to the board about the performance of our retirement plan. And you'll hear here shortly from Jeff Busick from Siegel Marco. They're the investment consultant that we've hired to help us review the investments and making sure that we have the right asset mix to meet our liabilities going forward. But with that, I'll just briefly go over kind of what we did in 2025. It was a strong year for the market and strong year for the plan. So the retirement plan ended up the year with about $1.4 billion worth of assets. That compares to $1.26 billion at the end of 2024. During that year, benefit and expenses exceeded the total contribution by about $30 million. And our investment gains were $167 million. So again, a very strong investment gain year. Our asset allocation mix was about 55%, 56% equity, 30% fixed income, and about 15% of alternative investments. And those include private real estate and private debt. And those asset mixes, the asset allocation was within our investment guidelines as approved by the board. And I'll mention that the performance of the plan, you probably have seen that. When you include net of fees, it was about 13.3%. Again, a very strong year for the performance of the retirement plan assets. But with that, really, if you don't have any questions, I'll turn it over to Jeff Busick. Again, Jeff is Senior Director at Siegel Marco. They're the investment consultant that we've hired to help us monitor the performance of our investments in the retirement plan. So not hearing any questions on my summary, I'll turn it over to Mr. Busick.
Well, good morning, everybody. I was reflecting this morning as I was preparing it. I think this is going to be close to my 13th or 14th year with you all. So I don't come close to him, but from an advisory role, I've been here for a while. So good to see you all. I'll try to be quick. We're trying to kind of set up some of this, but background, I'm the head of the Atlanta office. I run our public fund business and I run our Southeast region. So again, been here for a while. I think if I could have you turn to page 3. One more. That one. Yeah, okay. So let me just start by kind of giving you a little bit of background on the markets in 2025. As you look at this, these dark green bars are the yearly returns for various sectors of the market, and you see the equity markets, the US market was up over 17%, international markets up over 30%, largely from the currency effect that happened for international investors. Our dollar devalued during the year, so that helped international markets. But even the fixed income, our US fixed income up over 7% for the year. So as John said before, very, very strong results, absolute. But what you don't know and what you can't see in these numbers, especially with the equity markets, is they mask a really perverse equity environment that's been going on for about 2 years now. And when I say that, it's been a very narrow market. You may have heard reference from things in the press, the Magnificent Seven. These are 7 stocks that are attached to AI, and much like the internet bubble that we had back in 2000, they've really catapulted the market along. So we've had a very narrow market. We've also had a market where a lot of companies that in fact, don't have earnings. Their stocks keep going up and up and up. So really counterintuitive, the Finance 101, what we call low quality stocks really drove the market, and a narrow market at that. And the reason I frame that up is just to kind of give you some perspective. Since my time working with the committee and with you all, our premise really has been when we go into active management to make sure that we're conservative in nature there. When I say that, especially about the equity managers, they're not going to be focused on low quality stocks. They're going to be focused on high quality stocks that have reputable management, have reputable products, and also demonstrate a decent dividend yield over time. What you get out of these types of approaches, generally speaking, is protection on the downside. If the markets goes down 10%, maybe these managers are down 7%. But to try to protect on the downside and give up a little bit on the upside. And what I mean by that is we're going to go through these numbers and you're going to see the managers didn't do very well last year. Unlike, I think it was like 3 or 4 years ago, we were here, everything was very, very good. But this trend has kind of built out over the last 3 or 4 years as this low quality effect has taken hold. And the reason, again, I bring it up is we go through these numbers. One thing that these managers will do besides protecting on the downside is we as a committee, and I think the board's culture has always been, we're willing to give up a little bit on the upside. If we don't participate in a very strong market, but we know we got protection on the downside, we're willing to take that. And again, that's what you'll see as we kind of go through some of these numbers. And I thought it was important to just lay that out for you. The next page is a little bit of a replay from what John showed you, where we started out with 1.3. I'm sorry, I'm not sure who's controlling.
Next slide.
Right page. Bring it right. Not the right page.
No, one more. Yeah, I'm sorry. I'll look back now. Thank you. So this just shows us where we were, about 1.3 billion, and we ended the year at 1.4. External growth, that really is money out. Really has been 30 million down, but then you see the plus of 167 in gains over the year. As we turn to the next page, we have 2 financial objectives that we have set out for the plan. So now we're on page 5. The first one is to exceed our benchmark index net of investment management fees. As I said a couple of years ago, this looked good. We didn't have negative numbers at the bottom, but this market and the impact on the managers has drawn all these longer term numbers down. And as you go across this, I think that the thing to keep in perspective, and I think Brad mentioned it earlier, we do have a target return in the pension fund of 6.5%. So at 13.1, which really is 13.2 after we added in one of the private managers that reported late, those are net of fees. And while they're behind the policy index, they're very, very comfortably ahead of that 6.5% that the actuary uses as a basis to determine funding levels. And that number's been hit for quite a few years in a row. And again, I think it's something worth mentioning. It's not the objective here, obviously, but it's one that is a meaningful objective as you go through and look at the pension system, the pension plan as a whole, especially from a funded perspective. The second objective is on the next page. And this is to earn we're on page 6, I'm sorry. Right there, yeah. So the second objective is to outperform inflation by 4% over rolling years. And you can see we've been up and down over this time frame. We took a dip on that right side there when inflation went up to 9%. It put us behind, but we've just about caught back up with that. So again, preserving purchasing power is another component to the thought process of this objective. We're going to turn to the next page and start to talk a little bit about the domestic equity managers. And this is where you're going to see some of these numbers that I talked about on the equity side where the managers didn't hold up quite as well. A few years ago, I recommended that we put some money in an index fund. It saved the plan a few $1 million a year in active management fees. So our biggest component here, you can see the Russell 1000 index matched the index for the year, 17.3%. So a very strong absolute number there. Kane Anderson is a new manager that was brought in during 2025 to replace 2 other managers. Here we tried to think about collapsing the mandate into one to save on management and trading costs. And Kane Anderson was the firm that we selected. So there's not a number there for them yet. And then Frontier and LSV, a small cap growth and small cap value managers. You can see both of those managers lagged their benchmarks during the year, but actually were in the upper half of their peer group for the calendar year. One thing I'll mention, we have a lot of faith in these managers that these active managers in the portfolio will add value over time. I've said to the committee many, many times, when you take active risk, it's both good and bad. So there are going to be times like this where we haven't performed well, or times like a few years ago when we did. But just to give you some perspective on how quickly some of these numbers can turn around. Frontier, you see there for the calendar year, 12.3 versus 13.0 for their benchmark. 3 months later, at the end of March, their 1 year number is now 35.1 versus a benchmark return of 23.6. So you can see these things can turn pretty quickly. And I've always said to the committee and always believed, if we're going to take active risk in the portfolio, we're going to do it in areas where we feel very confident over time we're going to come out ahead net of fees. And I think that's a great example of how quickly some of these things can turn around in terms of just 1 quarter number, 1 quarter relative to their benchmark, a huge jump back there. The international equities on the next page. We did some consolidation here as well with Acadian coming on board in 2025. Our MFS is our core product, the one that benchmarks against the developed countries, 23.3% versus 31.1. Again, quality is something that impacted their performance during the year. And a very similar perspective with Global Alpha. I will say Global Alpha has been a little bit of a disappointment, but they did come in to see the committee last year. I have to be honest, I said to the committee when they were done presenting and left, he said everything that I had hoped he would say. Again, nobody's always going to have a performance level that's above the benchmark and in all periods. But I was hoping that they would explain it, and they went right to it and didn't hide anything. And I spent 10 years on the management side, so I felt very comfortable with the results, at least verbally from him. But on the paper, no. So, we have a very close eye on them. And we're going to be watching them, throughout this year. Not to steal a lot of thunder, but later this year, we're going to do an asset liability study, and I'll get to that as we end today. But I think that'll be one of the things that we look at is how we implement the decisions going forward of active versus passive. The next page is our domestic fixed income. Very good results here. Again, part of that index money that I recommended a few years ago went into the fixed income, and you can see State Street at the top there, tracking the U.S. aggregate. Reams has been a phenomenal manager for you. Been there for a very, very long time. Put up just great numbers consistently across the board. JP Morgan was in line for the year. But again, historically, done a good job at adding value there. McKay Shields is new. They are a high yield manager. It was interesting as I talk about this equity market, when they were in to see us earlier last year, one of the things that they said that was really impacting them was this equity market and the perverse nature of low quality. It was actually impacting a high yield manager, which really does play in lower quality companies, but they play in the upper end of that area. So that was by design. We wanted somebody that would be there but not take excessive risk. And I think that was interesting when they brought that up. And then the tips is just another index product that we have there. And again, a really good absolute number from that for the year, 6.9%. The next page is our emerging market debt, and this will close out performance for the most part. I'm sorry, private real estate track next. Stone Harbor has been in the portfolio for quite some time. We've seen them, and they're a good example of up and down in terms of outperformance, underperformance, but you can see in calendar year 2025, a very strong result there, up over 15% versus 13% for their benchmark. So 2 or 3 years ago, they did not look so good. They were on watch, but they bounced back and, again, kind of follow through on that thought that I said earlier. They're not going to outperform all the time. The next page is our private real estate. Real estate has been, it's had its share of troubles over the last 4 or 5 years. We've turned the corner. We have 2 portfolios in here, Harrison Street and PGM, the Parissa Fund. You can see Harrison Street up over 4.5% and Parissa up almost 6%. So real estate's turned a corner. These are 2 different approaches to real estate, and I think have done a pretty good job for the portfolio in terms of diversifying and bringing down volatility since they've been added to the portfolio. And just the last couple of pages, we have private credit. The first page here is Corbin. Our commitment to them was $20 million. You can see our contributions are above that. That's because we've reinvested money as they passed it out. They've taken it back in. Down in the lower left hand, that's what I wanted to take a look at real quick. The performance is a little different with private credit and private equity. We look at it as an IRR versus a time-weighted rate of return, but you can see a very, very strong since inception IRR here of over 10%. So this has been a good additive product in the portfolio in terms of diversifying and adding return. The next page is the second piece of this, and this is Neuberger and Berman's private equity. When we did this, or private debt, I'm sorry, when we did this, we put 2 pieces into the area of private credit, not just one manager, but 2. And you can see here, if you go down to the lower part of this, the commitment here at 80 million. We've made about 72 million contributions to date. But again, a very, very, very strong IRR here of over 12%, of 12%. So both of these have been additive to the portfolio. Last year, we re-upped with both managers, and the next page, they don't draw the money down all at one time. Here's the Newburgh and Berman, the next fund that we put money into. Again, a $40 million committed here. They've taken 16 of that so far. And really in the last, 6 months, the IRR, only 2%. So it's hard to gauge from where we are right now, but we believe in the private credit managers and that asset class in the portfolio. And I'd say since it's been in place, again, it's been additive in terms of returns and also in terms of helping volatility. So in summary, page 15, total fund return before that private credit manager, 13.1, net of fees, it's really 13.3. Assets increased by about 137 million, 1.4 billion at the end of the year. We lagged the performance of the benchmark during the year by 220 basis points. We had good, strong absolute returns from several managers, MFS. Even Global Alpha had a decent absolute return. Stone Harbor, Newburgh and Berman, Corbin in the private credit. We added managers at Acadian, Kane Anderson, and the Newburgh and Berman private at 5. And as I said before, we're going to be working on an asset liability study. We've already started it. Our target date to deliver it to the committee is June 1st. We do this about every 4 or 5 years regularly to make sure the target allocation that we have is going to meet the goals and objectives that we have set out. I don't think you'll see a lot of change from where we are right now in terms of asset classes to where we'll come out. But as we go through that process, one of the things we will be talking about is whether or not we want to maybe introduce more passive equity money into the portfolio and maybe take down the active risk a little bit. We've talked about that throughout the year with the committee. But that's a to be determined thing. But looking forward to this project, and I think as we do them, we always I think help educate the committee in terms of things that you don't see day to day, but every time we take one of these studies to them, I think it's fair to say that we all kind of learn something, and we will be testing some waters with some new asset classes, but we'll see, after we're done with that, how it all plays out.
Jeff, thanks for the report out. It's a lot of information. You have a great mastery of the asset classes and how this industry works. And I guess from my perspective, the district holds an appropriate concentration of equities and fixed income to be successful in the long term. We hold different asset classes, whether it's real estate, whether it's private credit, whether it's global or domestic equities. We have a smattering of those. I would just say for the room, I think you would agree that we've spent most of our time recently talking about how companies that don't have great fundamentals are the companies that are driving disproportionately high yield. And so the active managers that are disciplined, that are focused on the fundamentals, that are, I don't want to say playing the long game, but when they're looking at year over year revenue, when they're looking at the creditworthiness of some of these organizations, when they look at their ability to manage costs, when they look at their product line, they're sticking to the things that have proven wise over the long haul. And a lot of the yields are coming from shops that don't have year over year sustained performance. They are high potential organizations. They don't have great fundamentals. They don't have large substantiated earnings. And we think that's really complicating the active manager's abilities to outperform the index. And I just want to say for the room, that's kind of the weight in our pack. We're trying to deal with that. And within the guidelines of the plan, do we need to look at doing some different things with a focus on the long haul? And I don't know if you would add anything to that or take anything away, but I think it would be helpful for the room to hear a concise perspective on it.
No, I think it's very appropriate. I think that's what we saw in 2025. We saw it in 2024. But we also saw it in 2000, and we saw it really to some degree during the COVID problem, but not the great financial crisis was actually probably another, 2006. But yeah, these aberrations like this, they're not sustainable. And I think that's the most important thing to remember. When the internet bubble happened, everybody kind of jumped on that bandwagon. Companies that were losing money saw their stock prices go up 200% and 300%. That's not sustainable. I mean, there really is some truth to finance 101 and cash flow. And if you don't have it and you don't have sustainable earnings, that's really a short-term phenomenon. And if you can time that, then more power to you. But a lot of these managers, and I think it goes back to what you said, Brad, they're in this, for a longer period of time. So I've affectionately joked around about Warren Buffett. He's going to be in the Hall of Fame. There's a lot of other guys just like him and women. Their career, point A to point B, a lot of money earned. You truncate that and look at ups and downs that they had. There were times, and I can still remember him. He bought a railroad. I forget which one, and he said, "I look like one of the dumbest investors right now because it didn't work out very well for him." So that's what I'm talking about, active risk. They're not always going to be there. We are, obviously juggling that, and our managers in the portfolio, Global Alpha maybe be the exception, but we are very confident in them. Just like that one that I showed you, in one quarter, the numbers jumped dramatically to outperformance. So I think we can hope to see that coming down the road here. Well, it will be in 2025, I'm sorry, 2026 or 2027, I don't know, but these things will end. And that's the important part of it. And that's where, quite honestly, I've said this to the committee, it's a bit of a gut check, because it sounds great to have gotten those absolute returns from the indices. But when you start to think about 6 stocks in the S&P 500, or 7 stocks, I'm sorry, giving you about 60% of the return of that index, that's a different kind of risk. And that's a pretty explosive risk, because if things switch, then the managers that are focused on fundamental investing, the managers that are pretty well diversified in their portfolios, that comes back to what I said. If there's a correction in an index that's been led by 7 stocks and it goes down, the likelihood is very strong that a well-diversified manager who's stuck to fundamentals is going to outperform and hold up better in that down market.
Thank you, Jeff. I appreciate that.
Thanks, folks. It's always a
I'm gonna ask
pleasure.
some questions, Jeff.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, well, I want to thread on that because I'm mindful of what is our job here as board members. And we approve, we're responsible for approving policy, right? Like that's where I'm just thinking from a governance standpoint, and incorporated into that governance are those 2 objectives. And we're underperforming the objectives, right? We're not meeting the objectives. Objective 1, we're below going back 15 years. And objective 2, when we look at compared to the CPI, it's not by much, but we're below both over 10 years and 20 years. So I look at that and I think to myself, are we underperforming? Are the benchmarks that we're looking to correct? I'm mindful of what you're describing in terms of the sensitivity of, the uniqueness of the time, but I'm seeing us underperforming against our objectives. And I'm curious about whether or not those are, like, help me put that in context then, if you could. If we're looking at this over the long term, I assume these objectives are aimed at measuring performance over the long run. Help me understand.
Right. Okay. So hopefully that just sounds like I'm trying to be flip, because I'm not.
Yeah.
So when you start to look at a point in time, and Brad brought the same questions up middle of last year. When you look at a point in time, that rollback can be very much affected by what's going on short term. So as we looked at the 10 years and beyond, I did an analysis for the committee, and the linkage that you see there, yeah, this front end has a lot to do with this, but there were also managers that were in there over time that we had to replace. There were organizational changes, their performance wasn't good. Managers that we made it, we had recommended, but then suddenly something's different. We don't recommend them anymore. We put them on watch. There's a formal process that period of time that you're looking at is a combination of that. So first and foremost, the managers that are in there right now, on average, have been there about 2.5 years. The equity managers, very, very short time, other than the index funds, for the most part, very short time. So as we go through and say, okay, we haven't done well right now, if you go back 3 or 4 years and looked at that same 2 pages, we were beating. So in part, this point in time thing affects what we're looking at today, just like it affected what we were looking at 3 or 4 years ago when we were ahead. I still think the benchmarks are fine. I think, as I've said all along, if you're going to take active risk, the net of fees, you got to outperform. So that I had that changed. I don't know, John, 3 or 4 years ago, I challenged that we changed that benchmark to a net of fee for the total fund. The second benchmark, to be candid, is probably more appropriate for an endowment and foundation. Purchasing power is very important to an endowment and foundation. It's less important, not important. It's less important to a defined benefit plan. The point that I kept mentioning at the very front end about that 6.5% return, that's really the bogey. Excuse me, I've got a bad spine from football, so sometimes I kind of wobble a little bit. That bogey is really a criteria to stay measured against. And we always do, we always mention it, but the inflation one, it's there, I get it. If you said to me, is there a blank slate, should we get rid of that? I'd probably say, yeah, I'd probably make sure we have that bogey in there for the actuary. But I think the answer to your question, we're looking at a point in time, just like we were 3 or 4 years ago. It's impacted by this perverse environment. It will change. It's very, very likely in 2 years, if not sooner, we'll come back and look at this and it'll be very different. I'm sure the second one, as we roll through this year, we're going to pop up above that next year. And as far as the active managers, I can't tell you when, other than I can tell you I feel confident they will provide value over time.
So and I think it's very important because I had similar questions before. I've had this conversation with board members. What do you see on those tables? It's not a time series. It's a snapshot. It's today using the data we have today based on the past 10 years average, 7 years average, 5 years average. Doesn't mean that we have always underperformed. I think when you look at the time series, it's very different. You would have to look at the 10-year average for each one of those past 10 years, and then you would have this is what Jeff is talking about. In 2023 was a rough year for the market. I think what you're talking about is the numbers that you see here are including that short-term performance that we've had in the past few years has not been great, but it doesn't mean that it has been that way. But I really appreciate the push here because this is something that Brad and I have talked about.
Great question.
Do we change our strategy and not just the benchmark, right? Is it the active versus passive management? At what point do we make changes ultimately so that we can achieve the results that we're looking for?
So will the asset liability study be, the results of that be the thing that causes us to have that conversation? Is that right? Yes.
Nailed it. Sir.
All right.
I think the other two, if we just zoom out, we'll talk about SD14 later today. The expectation on the plan side from an actuary perspective is we earn 6.5. We've been earning 6.5. So the 6.9 versus the 7.3 is a look from an efficiency perspective on his active management paying off. And Jeff's getting a lot of me on that. And so we're kind of working through that, as we've said, but we've hit the discount rate. We funded the ARC, and I think those are all great notches in the objective. We need to continue to talk about how do we improve this.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks for the question. Okay, anybody else? All right, well, thank you, folks. Always a pleasure to see you.
Thank
Take
you.
care.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming. Okay, 401k 457, we're doing a lot of it consecutive. Tis April. So Tim Vasquez will come up and talk about how our retirement plan is doing that we offer our employees that is not defined benefit.
Thank you very much. And so in addition to your pension plan, we have not one, but two deferred compensation plans for employees to participate in, the 401k and the 457 plan. And I just checked the numbers. I have like 700 employees that do both. And that's phenomenal participation. It's their own investment in their future, which is great. We're great that we offer it. Last year when I presented it, we were on the precipice of $700 million. This year we're on the precipice of $800 million. So would that the market would do that every year. I'll show a couple of numbers there that OPPD offers a match, which is fantastic. That was about $6 million worth. But then OPPD employees participated $16 million, more than twice that match. And that's phenomenal. You want that kind of participation from participants in this type of a plan. As Siegel just mentioned, we made the same change to the Wellington Fund in our plan, and we actually did piggyback on their process, and we also did choose the Kane Anderson investment. But I want to point out a little nuance here. It says CIT, for those of us in this field, when you start investing and you don't have many funds, you do a retail share, it's your most expensive, you get to move through the industrial or the other level, and then you eventually, when you get enough, you get to go to the CIT. It's even cheaper for the participants. And so we had enough funds that we could do the CIT for this one. That's our third one in these retirement plans, which is great. And then the attachment is all of the performance of each individual fund for the year, similar to what Jeff was talking about. You rarely see so many double-digit gains. This is one you just might want to frame this and just enjoy it for the temps. That's all I have. Would happy any questions?
Every employee could participate in this if they choose to do so.
Everyone can do one or two. And last I checked, we're 97%. I saw a number that wasn't quite as high, and I will challenge people on that number, but 97% was the last time we reviewed it as how many people participate. Every now and then I go chasing those 3%, and it's usually some unusual circumstance. They have garnishment or whatever that's working against them. They're like, yes, I really want to participate. Like, well, we want you to participate. So
Tim, what would be average participation for a company our size?
average for utilities, like maybe 89, 88%. So utility already has high participation rates. We get to see our engagement levels each year, and we have so many people that are actively engaged in this. We have people that joke, well, maybe I've only checked it twice this week. Well, once a month is recommended, but we have, I'd say, a good 66% active engagement every year from people actively calling, reviewing, wanting to be a part of this plan. It's great.
So it's been a while since I participated in a plan like this. What are the limits now? The federal limits on participation.
Someone keep me honest. Is it 18,000?
23,000.
23,000.
Yeah.
Times two.
Oh, I see, is that total or is that free?
You don't have to have it between the two, and that's why it's so incredible what you can do. And then when you find someone who's actually maxing out in both of them, you just pat them on the back and say, that's good for you.
Tim has a passion for this, and your passion benefits our employees in terms of their long-term
We have
financial.
made big changes to this plan. You and I did one specifically. We got to make this available. We got to get Roth available. We got to get conversion available. This is my part-time job that I really is for the benefit of every employee here and retiree and retiree, John.
John,
I will call out, Tim, last year there was an employee who retired after many, many years of service, and she was sharing with me how impactful your advice was and how you helped her and her family get on these savings and how incredibly grateful she was. So it's just one example, but I think that passion really shows up in the daily interactions I have with employees. So thank you.
Now, when we get to 1 billion, Javier's promised us pizza, so I'm gonna hold it. Hopefully in 2 years, right? Any questions?
Thank you too.
Thanks, Jim.
Thank you very much.
You want to keep it
All
going?
right, we'll do one more. Thank you, Chair. OPEB, other post-employment benefits. Jim Anderson here is to give us a profile on our OPEB trusts, making sure we're in good standing here with our obligations. Jim?
Afternoon, or still morning, I guess. Feels like it's gotten a little bit long. The district has 2 OPEB trusts. They were identified by when the employees are hired. You're either pre-2008 or post-2007. That just indicates the level of benefits that you will receive once you retire, via health insurance, life insurance, kind of the employee benefit packages. We had a good year in the OPEB trust. The pre-2008 trust is now at 241 million, showing solid growth. The asset allocations were within the policy. That policy was just reviewed in 2025. We did an asset liability study for both plans. At that time, everything kind of pointed to there wasn't a lot to gain by changing our policy. So those remain the same for this window. The OPEB, the pre-2008, I keep wanting to call it OPEB A. That's how we identify them, A and B. But it had a 17.1% return for 2025. OPEB B, or the pre-post 2007, we're now at 14 million. And that fund is also within the policy for the investments, and it had an 11.1% return. Those numbers compare to 7% target for the pre-2008 fund and a 5.25% target for the post. And then on the second page, you will see those investments broken out in their associated returns.
Can you just remind me of some particulars? It says here that for OPPD, so the post 2007, there were no retiree contributions during 2025. There were some.
Yeah, that
OPEB A. I don't.
it's the difference in the way the benefits were given to those employees. B is more of it's a VEBA, or Voluntary Employee Benefit Association, where they just get a pocket of money to spend to pay for COBRA and those kinds of things. There really isn't going to be a lot of contributions from that plan ever. While the other plan is kind of, those retirees are treated more like they're still employees, that they're paying a monthly premium.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you.
I think the other thing that shows up in this question too is B is effectively cash funded.
It is.
And so if it doesn't need a contribution, sometimes we don't necessarily.
Yeah, we're
The
funding.
district makes a
in our-
contribution, but the employees that are within that plan do not. Is that?
They won't put any money in themselves while they're working.
Right.
We put an ARC in it.
Thank you.
This is an important distinction, and thank you for asking the question. I regularly meet with retiree groups. We have different conversations about their pension plan, et cetera, and desire for cost of living adjustments. And it's really interesting when just recently a few retirees approached me and thanked us for their OPEB. These are retirees who retired pre-2008. Saying that the medical benefits we're receiving are incredible. And you can see this in the amount of funding that we have on that OPEB A, that it's incredibly important for a lot of our retirees, where they still get very similar, if not the same, medical benefits as when they were. We since changed that since 2008, and the benefits went down significantly, but there's a big portion of our retirees who still enjoy that.
It's the biggest population currently. Those will flip eventually, but it still is the biggest population.
Chair, I know that the board is very concerned about employees' financial well-being. The 3 annual reports may not be the reasons that you all got out of bed today. So thank you for letting us get through it and for the detailed reporting. Appreciate that.
I appreciate it as well. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
It's been great information. Thanks.
All right, and keeping in that theme, we've got one more for you, Mr. Underwood, and that's our SD 14.
SD 14, Mr. Thurber's going to return here, do SD 14, if I'm not mistaken. This is the board's guidance to us on what you expect for the retirement plan funding report. So we have a few slides here to demonstrate why we've accomplished what you've asked us to accomplish.
Thank you.
Great. Well, as you're aware, the board has set up an SD 14 for us to look at retirement plan funding and making sure that we have adequate funding policy so that our the liabilities we owe to employees and retirees will be met. And so as part of that process to make sure that we have adequate funds available, there are 3 main components. The first is that we will use a nationally recognized actuarial firm to perform an analysis each year to look at the fund and determine how much we have to contribute to the fund. And that we will use a discount rate that will be determined based off of the fund's funded status and the required contributions. And we'll use an investment consultant to assist us with that determination of the discount rate. And the district's intention to every year fund our annual required contribution that will fund it 100%. So those are the 3 main components of SD 14. So the first one, we use Aon. They're one of the largest actuarial firms in the nation. They have been our actuary for a number of years. And in fact, we actually went through a benchmark study where we evaluated Aon, and the benchmark study looked at them compared to other actuaries and recommended that we continue to use Aon as our main actuary. And they're the ones that provide us with the calculation of our annual required contribution. So we continue to use Aon as our actuary. Next slide, the discount rate. And that has been determined with support of both Siegel Marco and Aon, where the district is using right now 6.5% as our discount rate. And that's really based off of our current funded status and the required annual contribution that would take us to a fully funded status and the asset mix that we have. It's very important to look at the asset mix. How much are our assets going to earn over time? And based off of both Aon and Siegel Marco's recommendation, 6.5% is our current discount rate. It's a very conservative discount rate. In fact, we've heard that there is support for us to actually have a higher discount rate than 6.5% based off of our plan assets. But we've decided to continue as of right now to use 6.5%. And the asset liability study we're just starting will help us kind of finalize that determination here over the next few months. And you can see the annual required contribution the district has made ever since the pension plan has been around, has made 100% of the annual required contribution each year. You can see the growth in that over the last 5 to 6 years. And the projection for 2026, and we have budgeted $72.9 million annual required contribution. Now, please note that does not include the $95 million extra contribution we made in 2021 and the $50 million extra contribution we made in 2023. So that's $145 million of additional monies we put in above these annual amounts that you see. And then you can see the funded status of the plan. The funded status has stayed fairly static over this period of time. It was impacted, you see in 2023, we had a negative return of 14%. And that was what the market was during that period of time. And that did have a negative impact on our discount rate over the last couple of years. There's about a 5-year amortization of that negative return that takes place. And you can see the drop that took place in 24 and 25 as a result of kind of the amortization of the negative 14.4% return. We did earn, as you've heard here, over 13% in 2025. That'll be factored in. And our discount rate, not discount rate, but our funded ratio will be adjusted probably at a higher amount than what you see here currently as a result of the higher return. And that'll be beginning in 2026.
Hey, John.
Yes.
Just for, and maybe it isn't that easy to come up with a number, but say if our discount rate was 7% this year, how much impact would that have on the funded ratio? I'm not saying we should do that. I'm just saying is, how impactful would that be?
We did a little calculation and it would be about 4 or 5% increase in our funded ratio by just that one change.
If we change it from 6.5 to what?
7%.
7%.
Yeah.
So it is commendable. I can see where it'd be tempting to raise that to show, hey, look how great the system is, but it's more important to be.
Right. We only want to do that as appropriate based on the projections of what our assets will earn.
And that's important because there are many organizations, not only in Nebraska, but across the country that show a higher funded ratio. And some of them may be because they choose to have a higher discount rate. Right. So artificially, you can make that look better. And I think this is one of the things that I commend the district for being more conservative. And we lower the discount rate to 6.5% to be more realistic, even though that is working against the funded ratio. But I think that's a conservative assumption that helps us really get that funding on behalf of our employees.
There's no sense in raising a discount rate if you're not likely to reach it.
Exactly.
John, you had described earlier, I think I heard you say, I'm summarizing, paraphrasing, but I think I heard you say you've heard support from others for raising the discount rate.
And that would
Could you help me
be,
understand who?
yeah, part of our external accountant that we have, the external auditor that goes through and audits our books. They also audit our pension plans, and they've indicated that we're on the very low end of what they believe our fund could support as far as a discount rate.
All right, thank you.
So with that, our recommendation is that, well, I believe this probably, Director Moody, that might be something that you want to comment on.
Yeah, this is the Finance Committee's job. We took a quick look at the report meeting. It wasn't a page turn, but we stopped and said, is there anything else that the committee wants to include? We were good. And then we aligned on the recommendation that we are sufficiently compliant. So that's what the committee's recommendation is.
Be happy to answer any further questions.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks, John.
Thanks, John.
Yep.
Thanks, everybody.
Sorry, Matt, do you want to do this? Mine.
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you.
Yeah, this is just open space. Offer any additional comments on what's been accomplished, challenges. This is one of, I think, 3 SDs we're looking at today. So wanted to make sure we leave the space.
I'll just mention, having been on Finance Committee for a couple of years, that I recall Mr. Thurber saying that OPPD and everybody in the market struggled, I think, between 2000 and 2008. So all of that history impacts our currently where we are as well. I just have great respect for the methodical, thoughtful, considered way that the trust department goes about working with this. I think it's yeah, it's like, well, if we lose our shirts, but we've gambled, is that good? And so that tough balance of enough to risk to get a reward, but not so much risk that we really harm ourselves. It's a tough one to do, to get to the middle of that. So I commend them for their work. Very thoughtful, always. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. Other thoughts and comments, colleagues?
Yeah, I'll echo that appreciation for the care and consideration. That's clear that that's gone into these last couple hours, and work that was demonstrated, I guess, by these last couple hours. So thank you to everyone that's been involved.
I would echo it. I think the warning here, and I really appreciate the tension between conservative assumptions versus realistic assumptions and where we go. And at some point, it might be prudent to change those assumptions. In my prior life, many years ago, as an investment banker, I used to advise municipalities and public entities that have pension plans, and there were a few instances where increasing the discount rate not only increases your funding percentage, but it also lowers your annual required contribution. There's always that temptation if you're trying to manage a budget and you're trying to figure out where can we squeeze the budget. That is an assumption that's has some organizations have made. And that's a warning. That one of the other benefits of having a lower discount rate is forces us to put more money into it. Now, at some point, we may have enough, and it might be a prudent thing for us to lower that at some point. But I think that's another good fiscal discipline that we have that forces us to continue to contribute a healthy amount towards the pension.
Okay. I want to give you an opportunity because what's been accomplished, challenges or strategic implications, CFO, any thoughts you want to offer here?
Thank you for the question. Nothing more than just the active passive management conversation has got to continue.
Okay.
In order to be the best stewards, this has got to be as efficient as we can make it. And this is a timeless challenge. So John and I have been very clear with the committee on our appetites to see that conversation through. We'll do the asset liability study. We'll bring that information back and we'll continue to have the conversations. Thank
Great.
you. Thank you for asking.
So I had the exact same question Greg did at the time when we looked at objective number 1 and the 1, 2, 3, 5, 10, 15-year chart. And Javier, I think your point about that is a snapshot looking backwards over those time intervals. But if you looked at time series data of how we've done over time, it might reveal a different picture. Is it possible to put that together so that we could see that? I mean, one way would be just pull up the monitoring reports or the annual reports from the past and then look back through them. And I'm sure we could do that. But is that data we could collect so that we get a better idea of, when you look at it in this form, it does look like we missed by 1% or 2 on every time interval. But if you look at the series data, that would
Yeah,
say
we can. I think there's well, I'll let her see it.
Yeah. I have it as page 15 of the plan report has a pretty good description to it.
Okay.
Or I'm sorry, forgive me. I'm sorry, page 5 in that document. I'm not sure how it's posted on Diligent. I couldn't find it.
Okay.
But what is really happening is the last 4 or 5 years have been so impactful against, like if you look at year 6 through 15, if you look at a 10-year slice, it looks the way we would want it to look, where we're generally outperforming. But because the yield performance in years 1 through 5 is so magnified in its concentration, it affects the whole strip, for lack of a better term. And so those are just some of the things we need to talk.
Yeah. I had made the same note to bring to the conversation that Brad and I always have about what does the finance committee need to be working on?
Yes.
And I think I was thinking about your question as sort of when we do the asset liability study and that leads to all the objectives, right? That to me is the place where I want to kind of look at those two things side by side to determine, work with obviously the committee, but to determine what the right approach is. So we're aligned. I was thinking the same way.
Sounds good. Thanks.
Okay, pausing for any last comments or questions. Okay, thanks, Director Core.
Yeah, thank you. We'll start with Mr. McAree, please.
All right, I am happy to provide a brief intermission to the Brad Underwood and team show today.
Thank you for that comment.
Very well done. We're happy to talk about Strategic Directive 5, customer satisfaction, and I'm pleased to welcome Kay Thomas, our Director of Corporate Marketing and Communications, who will lead us through today's report.
Thank you, Tim, and thanks everyone here presenting on behalf also of mine and Matt Hardbeck's team. So he might be able to have the harder questions if you have those after the fact. Here's our roadmap for today. But before we start, I want to take a moment to acknowledge someone who is really deeply connected to the work you're about to see and who's not with us. Our colleague and friend Michael Leary passed away this past weekend. Michael had been with OPPD for 26 years, since 2000, right out of college. And he was truly a brilliant market research mind. And his leadership shaped so much of our customer insight work, and especially our longstanding relationship with JD Power, which he guided with such care and expertise. But beyond his professional contributions, Michael is simply a wonderful person. I'm sorry. He was warm and kind and genuinely personable. He approached every conversation with balance and objectivity, and he had a calm, measured presence that put everyone at ease. That calmness and warmth were, for many of us, his defining qualities. So much of the foundation of this report reflects Michael's thoughtful work, and we're grateful for his contributions. He will be greatly missed. We look forward to honoring him this Thursday during our President's Report as well.
Thank you, Kate.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, ST5 centers on a simple premise that customer satisfaction is fundamental to delivering OPPD's vision as a customer-owned utility. The board expects us to gather meaningful customer feedback through syndicated studies and use that information to guide our planning and investments. So if we go to the next slide. The way that we think about that simply is that there are three big accountabilities here. There's sharing the big picture by regularly reporting customer trends to the board. Second, we give customers a voice through multiple channels for feedback and concern resolution. And finally, we measure, learn, and respond by using syndicated benchmarks and other measures to make sure that we are top quartile among our peers. And these commitments help ensure that customer satisfaction isn't just measured, but actually acted upon. So if we go through each of those three areas, we'll talk about this broadly. So this is really those trends. At a macro level, I think it's important to acknowledge the general environment our customers, even nationally, have been navigating. Comes as no surprise that in 2025, affordability pressure continued, and it was really the primary theme. Persistent inflation and higher cost of living, less financial assistance, continued severe weather was something that did impact household budgets and business customer budgets. From an industry perspective, JD Power and Escalent alike, have confirmed this, that especially residential satisfaction declined overall nationally as affordability expectations, really grew. And then with that, communication expectations. So really customers wanting to understand the why of, not only the value that they're getting, but also, telling us why things were changing or why their bills were what they were. I am happy to say that despite these challenges, which you heard about in 2024 as well, OPPD continued to perform really strongly. Even you'll see with maybe a more difficult measuring stick. Customers were still feeling those pressure of those rising costs, but our service experience, and we see this in our verbatims as well, remained our relative strength. Okay, if we go to the next slide, this is really just a reminder about how we give our customers a voice. It's a cornerstone, right? That if customers know how they can reach us, if something doesn't feel fair, that they have many options to do that. So today, customers can raise concerns through online and mobile channels, which we continue to optimize. Email, phone, in person, their elected board members. We feel this multi-channel approach ensures we're really accessible to all customer groups. And one stat that's just one, but I think helpful, is that through our online form and our board contact emails that many of you see, we actually saw more than 700 in 2025, which is a 25% increase over 2024. And that's really consistent with a steady year-over-year increase over the past 5 years. So yes, while some topics that have, are more, people have more passion for them, we do see a steady year-over-year increase, which tells us people care. They're finding that it's easy for them to submit feedback. And then finally, we do rely on a range of syndicated studies that allow us to benchmark against similar utilities. So we'll talk about two today, JD Power and Escalent. But we also use customer care transaction studies at a more micro level, a customer communications kind of topic and sentiment study, and any other custom studies that we need to have for product development and marketing. And similarly, we're extremely connected with our account executive team within customer service and have great debriefs about daily account executive business interactions, insights, and so on. So onto the part that I think everyone is always waiting for, our actual results. And we'll start with residential. I'll have a spoiler here. So we met top quartile for both residential and business studies. So hopefully that puts everyone at ease and we can explain a little bit about how we got there. This slide I put here, you may remember it, somewhat similar from years past. But what's different is that this year, JD Power switched to a new, what they're calling an 8-dimension model. So years past, we may have remembered 6, they called them categories. Now they're 8 dimensions, similar, but you know, some new branding there. And what you'll see is that they have designed this to have a little bit more better measurement and a more holistic experience. So whereas it's power quality, reliability, communications, price, billing and payment, customer care, corporate citizenship in the past, you'll see they're slightly different now. Total monthly cost, trust, safety and reliability, ease of doing business, information provided, people, problem resolution, and digital channels. So similar sentiment, but it just puts a finer point on a more modern utility experience. They're the one of the last of the industries to kind of go to an 8-dimension model. So it's proven to work and useful in other industries. Escalent model remains the same. They have 3 primary categories, but capture similar sentiments for the business side. Okay, next slide. Okay, what this shows us is that overall we ranked 3rd in our Midwest mid-sized utility segment for 2025. We are in a comparative set of 16. We need to rank number 4 or better to be top quartile. We were number 3 in 2025, which we're pleased, not satisfied with. We'd love to be at the top. However, we're really heartened by this because this was a year that, in my layman's terms, we started getting graded on the curve. So as before, we were using a 10-point scale that was numerical. JD Power switched to a 6-point subjective scale called poor to perfect. And the idea being that this has more differentiation between those who were rated as perfect. If you're paying for a syndicated study, you want to really understand who the best of the best is so you can learn from them. And what we're seeing is that that scale kind of worked out how we thought it would. Good, great, and excellent. You'll see a range there where they're pretty similar. And then you look at that perfect score, which we were rated at, that's where we can really learn how to perfect. Also, what I'm heartened by is, yes, Otter Tail has a nice lead there, but there's really a pretty tight spread between number 2 through number 5. So we performed well, and we know that we have some things to learn. The other grain of salt that we like to say is that, as JD Power has noted, because this was our first year, we might see volatility across some of those utilities, right, for the next few years. We want to be remaining in number 4 or better, but as this new scale settles, you might see some different performers settle to the top. But we are starting from a strong position within our comparative set. To the right, if you are able to see, those go into each of the dimensions. Actually, I'll click, if we can go to the next slide, this might be easier to see. It's similar to the chart that was on the bottom right. This shows just the weight of those dimensions, and then OPPD in orange on the left, and how we compare with both the Midwest mid-size average and our industry average. So good news, we are above both industry and Midwest mid-size average across every dimension. What's also kind of cool is, yes, we were number 3 or number 4 in each of those dimensions, but we were still top quartile. There have been years where we might be number 1 in safety and reliability, but number 6 in trust. So I think it's notable that we were still hanging in first quartile among all of those, with room to improve. If we go to the next slide, this is really just a slide that corroborates what we're seeing on our residential side of those transaction surveys. So we use a local group, MSR. They do have a very small syndicated study that measures utility performance among their customer care representatives. And so they have these anonymous utilities that were measured against locally or regionally, and then a national study. And it's just overall satisfaction. And I think we should be very proud that we have 88.3% of those who interact with our utility who say they're very satisfied. Our internal goal is 90% because we always have to be striving for more, but we should be pleased, relatively speaking, with how we're performing. Okay, and then on to business. So Escalent measures similar components, and we are measured among a comparative set of 20 and just Midwest. So size is not an issue, right? We're with the big boys here as well. And within that comparative set, we ranked number 4. So we would have had to be number 5 or better for top quartile. I think what we're pleased about is that this really reflects what we're also seeing with our internal benchmarking study with MSR Group on our small to medium business side. And one notable thing that we're very pleased about is that Escalent switched their methodology last year to put more weight on small to medium business input, because that's the majority of most businesses, as opposed to just those who are large employers or have a large revenue. And so we think this is representative of, those more than 30,000 businesses we serve, and is consistent with what we're seeing. I think the echo here is what's, I just think, interesting to note is that at least historically, the Midwest and sometimes the South, our performance lags a little bit what happens on the coast. And nationally, what we've seen is business engagement actually rose for the coasts, and it was still lagging in the South and the Midwest. And, we think that could be related to price and maybe just a little bit more, the South and or the Midwest are feeling economic pressures more intensely, and perhaps the coast had gotten time to acclimate to it. We'll see how that kind of goes. But it is still those cost pressures that remain our top focus, and where we see, where we're guided to have, our eye on it. I think what's also interesting, just so you know where we're looking at, is in light of this kind of high, cost pressure environment, both of our syndicated study providers have said really should, focus on your digital experience, which was great because in late December, we launched our My OPPD app, which launched in January. These results do not reflect that. So it's kind of a natural control environment for us to see, hey, as we roll that out, and as you see more concerted pushes to get people to enroll in that, if that helps, really boost our scores even more. It felt good that we were on the right track in terms of our focus areas. Okay, and then if we go to the end, based on what we provided and our performance in reaching top quartile, just our recommendation that we're found sufficiently in compliance. And I will open it up for questions.
Congratulations.
Yeah.
This is not done without work. So
It is, yeah.
nice
Huge
to hear.
team effort across the organization. Yeah, absolutely.
Director Wagner, I just want to echo that for OPPD people, everyone, I've never seen an organization with more honesty of purpose. Of everyone wants to get up every morning wanting to do the right thing for customers. And this is a summation of all customer satisfaction is the summation of big things done well and a lot of little things done well also. Is my power on, and is my bill affordable, and it's, if I have to talk to someone, can I accomplish what I need to? Can I find the information easily online? It's all of those things combined, and that's why I love this measure. So thanks for noting that.
Okay. I had a constituent share with me that they called in for what seemed like a simple ask or, a problem that could be easily resolved. The customer service representative actually was able to think multiple steps forward and realize the situation was actually much more tangled than a simple on the surface issue. And so what could have ended up being 5, 10, 15 calls into customer service was resolved in 1 or 2 touch points because of that very proactive and very knowledgeable position that customer service was able to provide that customer in that moment. So thank you so
Matt
much.
should be recognized for that because it's really under his leadership that the customer care
Yeah,
team
maybe
does
one
that.
thing on that, we have a key matrix around first call resolution. That's a big part of our strategy within customer care. We want those kind of interactions, right? Where a customer calls in and they get their kind of issue resolved within the first call. So we track that. There's a lot of strategies that go behind that, but that's one that's great to hear.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Sorry, I'll just add, that's fantastic. And to echo Tim's point, this is I view this as sort of a full organization effort, right? Like that is measured across multiple different facets, liability, safety, cost, et cetera, et cetera. So this is like a really, really interesting, for me, it's really interesting to see what the public's view of us is, right? Trust, like all of these things that are essential to who we are. It's nice to get this feedback that, yes, the way in which we're handling customers when they call is fantastic. Absolutely. And to me, I take this as a nice little picture for how we look as an organization writ large.
Thank you for saying that. I reflect on the fact that we're in the middle of the country, we get a lot of storms, and we get a lot of things that could make customers and do make customers upset. But we're not unique in that area. There are many other utilities who experience the same type of outages, the same type of cost pressures and income issues. And I think it's, to your point, Eric, it's the way in which our workforce shows up. Not like we can't eliminate outages. We can't eliminate affordability issues completely, but it's very, very important in the way in which our workforce is showing up day in and day out and really stepping up and doing the right thing. So I thank you for those comments. I think that
I appreciate that as well. There's perceptions that we can't even manage, right? A customer is comparing us to other industries, other interactions. Unfortunately, we can't change those kind of interactions, but we can work hard on the ones that we engage with customers around. A great example of this being an organizational effort was an award that we just won on the silver side of customer outage communications. So I look back to Brian Kramer and a lot of folks on Troy's team working through our March storm of last year. We submitted that as an example of how the organization can come together and really do some great things. And we were awarded a silver award by a national industry group around our effort in that space. So it's a great thing for kind of the whole organization to come together and provide a great example of what can be.
Very cool.
Thank you.
Guys. Thank you for.
Thanks, Kate. Thanks, Matt.
Tim, with this, thanks, Sarah, sorry. Just being cognizant of this slide as well, do any directors or Tim, do you have any reflections further than what we've had so far?
Nothing additional for me.
Thank you.
Just thinking about that strategic implication, I'll just echo what maybe Director Moody was getting at, is that customer trust on the transition and the journey that we are on in these very challenging years and moments, that customer trust is absolutely critical to where the organization's headed and what we need to deliver on over the next few years. So I'll just double down on that this is an ever more important strategic directive.
Yep. All right. Sorry, quick question. I think I know the answer to this question, but I'll ask it anyway. The directive calls for, sorry, I'm pulling it up. Goal to achieve top quartile performance and customer satisfaction for similar size utilities in the region across customer classes. Industrial is not included. Is that because we don't have a data set for comparison purposes? Okay. I just figured that was the
And
case.
for this purpose, it's really lumped into the business. That's why we
Okay.
use that terminology of business customers
Got it.
versus
Okay.
residential customers.
Thank you. Okay.
also because different utilities have different ways they cut commercial versus industrial. Interesting.
All right, anybody else? Okay, thank you. Tim, if you want to keep it going with legislative update, please.
Certainly happy to welcome Randy Scott forwards, who will lead us through a legislative and regulatory update. We all know as we followed along that it's been eventful. And as we're drawing to conclusion here, we're going to narrow the focus, probably not on the litany of bills that we engaged in throughout the session, but probably narrow the focus and try to deepen the understanding a bit on some of the most consequential ones. So Randy, thanks for your work throughout the session along with Seth. I know you can breathe a sigh of relief now and.
Yep,
and
one more day.
So maybe I was jumping the gun. You're close. So welcome.
Thank you. And I'll be ushering us into the afternoon portion of today's meeting. So we will be going the full 60 days. We will be coming back on Friday. We were hoping we could get everything done by last week. So Friday will be, if the governor should choose to veto anything that passed last week, we will come back for an override vote if the senators so choose to override. Also, we are losing 11 senators this session due to term limits or not choosing to rerun for a second term. So there will be outgoing speeches and such on Friday. So we will come back on Friday. We can go next slide. There were two large, most of our focus bills for this session, and then a third that we were able to usher in kind of at the last here. So the first bill we'll talk about is LB 1010. That's a battery energy storage bill. This is our legislation that allows for standalone battery storage in addition to the associated battery storage with renewables. As it comes down to the end here, there were not a lot of changes from how it was introduced on the battery energy storage side. There were a few concerns. There was a little discussion on the floor to kind of make sure that the intent of the bill was recorded on the floor as far as definitions of immediate vicinity, how close the battery storage facility needs to be to your associated resource. There were two bills that were amended into it having to do with large loads, which would be 20 megawatts or larger, and data centers, which would be 10 megawatts or larger. So there were, those more are on that there needs to be standards with public power districts as to large loads and reporting requirements on data centers to the Department of Water, Environment, and Energy and to the Natural Resources Committee. So this bill, and you can go to next slide as well, was a huge lift, big effort from the Nebraska Power Association. It's really where 1010 originated. It took most of last interim. It's been almost I'd say probably 10 months or so, 9 to 10 months that we've been working on this. It's a big lift, good team effort. Brad's group was amazing on helping Seth and I understand a really good depth on the bill so that we could really advocate appropriately to senators on it. So the battery storage would require power review board review, consent from local utilities. There will be a power purchase agreement, and in exchange for eminent domain authority would go away from the public power utility to allow these standalone batteries to come in. So we wanted to make sure that we had enough control, if you would say, over the battery storage, that they're working with public power and not just kind of on their own, and we don't know what's going on with our transmission or our utilities. So it was a very big lift. Thank you to everyone who helped on this legislation. Second one, next slide, is LB 1261.
I may just interject for a second for the benefit of the board. This is a little bit of the diversion on that last slide where we see and hear lots of maybe inaccurate information about what these bills are. So that last slide and the one we'll see on 1261 were intentional, just to double click a bit on what the bills are and what they aren't in terms of their large commercial impact. Upon signing, they'll still go through the normal legal review, so we get official interpretation. But I just wanted to share that. And
yep, no, thanks for that.
Thank you.
Also, on LB 1010, it did pass final reading, 49 votes to no, 49 yes to no. So that's the best we could get. So it was very good. I would say all of this happened on Friday. There were so many bills that passed on Friday. Friday was kind of a crazy day. 1261 is the private generation facility serving industrial customers at 1,000 megawatts or larger. It did pass on final reading with 33 votes in support, 16 votes against. The Power Review Board has to approve. Governing bodies of public power utilities have permissions over, they would okay contracts. There is no retail sale in the bill. It prohibits retail sale. the private generation facility must serve the industrial customer unless the public power district waives that, and that is also something that the governing bodies would have authority over, that waiver. And it applies to contracts entered into prior to, there is a sunset date of December 2031. So we've got about a five-year sunset on this board. There were a lot, this received a lot of attention on the floor. Many amendments, motions, et cetera, were brought, and just a few passed. And so it was actually great conversation on the floor. Most senators that spoke, almost all of them spoke, were in favor of public power. So it was really a great discussion as to support of public power, but maybe differing viewpoints on this legislation. So it actually seemed to be a good spot for public power. We got a lot of good floor time, a lot of good discussion on all of our utilities in the state. So as I said, it did pass 33-16. Another big lift bill. So these were the two that took the most of our time on the floor and during the session this year. Any questions on either of those? Those were the largest two that we dealt with.
So as far as additional approval or action by the governing body at the public power district, there are kind of four considerations. Eminent domain is already covered by the legislation, and that waiver has been included now, correct?
Correct.
So contracts, that means contracts to us in terms of a PPA and from us in terms of an energy service agreement. Would those require board approval?
I would defer to
Yeah,
Steve
I might
on those
defer to
questions.
Steve
Yeah.
and/or I know Steve, once these get signed, what we typically do is, Steve, correct me, go through a full legal review, which would include, in this case, a governance perspective. So I think the answer, the very specific and studied answers would be forthcoming.
Okay, great. Glad to hear about that when that is ready, so we can make sure we understand what the implications are for ongoing work by the board when, if or when something like this does come to us.
Yep, absolutely. Yep.
Thank you.
Maybe, is the governor going to do a ceremonial signing for either of these?
That I have not heard yet, but I can get back to you on that. Next slide, please. And this goes a little more into detail, kind of what I just reviewed for your reading pleasure on what all is incorporated in 1261. Next slide. 1033 from Senator Ashley Spivey would require DHHS to make LIHEAP, so our low income home energy assistance program, crisis assistance payments. So those are specific under the LIHEAP program. And currently there is a limit of $500 per program year that can be applied for. And the crisis assistance is more for those customers that most of the time have had like a big life, something has happened, right? Like maybe has been laid off, has a medical emergency, a family medical emergency. And so paying those utility bills is a larger struggle than normal. Our average customers that would apply, that would qualify for this are at about a $741 bill right now. So that cap of 500 doesn't cover all of that. So we were able to raise it to $800. So that will cover our average now and a little bit more there, so that our customers and the debt can be completely wiped from their accounts, rather than helping a little bit, but they're still not out from under it. So it was attached to LB 958. So if you look up this bill specifically, it will not say that it moved through. It has been attached to another bill that passed 48-1. So those are good odds. When you're looking at what the governor may veto, typically if something got 48 votes, that's not something that would be typically looked at to veto. So we were glad for Senator Spivey for bringing that for us, and also for Senator Michaela Cavanaugh for allowing her to attach that bill onto 958. So a lot of good work by Senator Spivey and her staff on this bill, and we're really happy to get this put through last week.
So we have the customer assistance program, and we have discussed in the past that there have been people who were ineligible because of outstanding debt. So would this allow more reimbursement of existing past due bills to be cleared and brought current, so that they would then become eligible for the customer assistance program?
So that it's a specific, through the federal qualifications, there's a specific qualifications under that crisis assistance. So if they qualify through those for the specific crisis assistance, then yes, It is also part of the larger LIHEAP program, but this is a little more of a specific subset of that, if you will.
Very narrow tailored situation, probably not in mass to what you're talking about, Director Williams. It'd be very, very closely tailored around crisis assistance.
Crisis specifically, not broadly.
Right. I think it's actually defined within the program. Crisis assistance is a specific definition.
I think that an important part of this is that this doesn't mean that there's more money to assist, which is controversial. But to the extent that there is money, our customers would get access to that money faster, right? At the very first application, as opposed to having to wait, they get $500 and then there's money left over at the end.
Right.
But you would get that assistance faster, which is really what this money is designed for.
Absolutely. Okay, next slide, please. This list of bills here, all of these bills have passed in some form. They were either amended into other bills or passed on their own. To highlight, I would say 1096. At the end, it was attached. It actually passed on its own fully through final reading. Again, it has to do with foreign adversaries. We've been seeing bills, more and more bills on limiting foreign adversary access to anything critical infrastructure. It also helped with some of the business. There were some incentives that were potentially taken away through the Department of Revenue, and this kind of closed a loophole. There was a bill last year that was passed that had some unintended, broader consequences than they thought. So that kind of closed that loophole there. Some changes to Open Meetings Act, some changes to some incentives to broaden, to expand employment investment requirements under some incentives, and allowing for attorney's fees in certain frivolous lawsuits for political subdivisions. So those were all things that we followed that did pass all the way through. Next slide, please. And then bills not likely to pass, and at this point, I think we can probably say will not pass. Rates issues, some transmission issues with private transmission. We had put forth last year, did not get to the point where they would pass this year. Deceptive trade practices is a bill that we'll be continuing to work on, as well proclamations to disasters, and trying to, especially with our ice jams, and trying to work on getting quicker proclamations from the governor on that standpoint. Next slide, please. Other issues not likely to pass this year, some financial, real estate generation. There was a bill called the Grid Modernization Act that was passed that would have to do with large loads of 100 megawatts or larger, almost bringing 1261 down to 100 megawatts is almost what it would do. So that one we were able to curtail and not go anywhere, and focus our efforts on the much larger 1,000 megawatts or larger projects that were coming in. And I think last slide, next slide, almost last slide, there's two of these. Interim studies. So senators had, I believe, until day 50 to introduce interim studies, and I think committees, if they want to, could still do that, do a few on Friday if they want. Overall, there are a group of interim studies that we'll be watching that have to do with building codes, residential codes, energy codes, electrical codes. So we'll keep an eye on all of those. There seems to be a large focus on those this year. And so it wasn't surprising to us to see a number of interim studies introduced that way. Next slide as well. Also a few on economic development, urban revitalization, inland port authority, kind of in our economic development realm we'll have our eyes on. LR 471 I would draw your attention to. That is going to study natural gas issues in the state with our development, other public power utilities developments, growing as we are with our facilities, farming needs with ethanol and natural gas, and just kind of taking a look at where we are as a state with natural gas. And also LR 373 is the annual resolution on underfunded pensions and political subdivisions. And there's always a report, usually in November, December of the year, that we have our folks come in and testify on. So we'll keep an eye on all these interim studies. Some of them will become actual hearings. Some of them will just be things that senators do through their offices, and some may not get attention at all. So we'll keep our eyes on these and let you know if anything of note comes up. Any questions on anything legislative? All right, I think that does it.
Thank you, Reed.
Thank you very much.
All right, Mr. Bye.
Great. I'd like to welcome Clint to the podium. And Clint is our Director of Asset Management. And if you remember a few years ago, we combined all of our hires and generation asset management into one group. Clint and his team manage that. And I'll tell you, we have more clarity about the extent of condition of our assets, life cycle maintenance, and things of that nature than we ever have historically because of the work that this group is doing. And through visualization and data analytics, we're also, it's easier for us to prioritize the needs of the district. And that shows up when we go to our budgeting sessions with Brad and his team and what ends up in the budget each year. And so I think we'll have some good things to share as well as some challenges that we had this last year. And with that, I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, indeed we will. There's still always room to grow there though, Troy. Yeah, jump right into it. So strategic directive number 4, it's around the reliability of our services. We look at it in 4 broad categories. There is the energy supply or resources. The requirement there is that we have energy supply resources through our owned generation, our purchase power agreements, and our access to other markets through SPP to meet our customer demand 100% of the time. The next area of focus is generation, and we measure that with the E4 or equivalent forced outage rate. That's basically the amount of time our owned assets are in forced outage as a portion of how much time they're called upon to operate.
So unexpected outages.
Yes, correct. Forced outage, not planned. On the transmission side, the requirement of the strategic directive is that we meet the NERC reliability requirements for the transmission system. Then on the distribution side, this is where the customers are experiencing our system. So this is probably the tightest. It has 2 measurements. We look at both the frequency and the duration of outages through SAIDI, System Average Interruption Duration Index, average amount of minutes of outage all of our customers experience. And then SAFE, same thing, System Average Interruption Frequency Index, the frequency of outages our customers experience. Both of those use a correction called major event days. So when you have a major storm like we experienced in August or last year in March, those get excluded. So there's a statistical method for that to make sure that we are using a consistent benchmark to compare. But our target, since this is where the customers experience it, is first quartile performance there. And I should have said in generation, the target for E4 is mid-second quartile. So a little more room, but still pretty aggressive. Next slide, please, Aaron. So jump to the performance. Quick summary for the resources side, we did have energy supplied to meet requirements 100% of the time in 2025. On the transmission system, we had an audit with NERC on site. There were no material findings on reliability standards for our transmission system. On distribution, I'm kind of working from the best to the areas for most improvement here. On the distribution system, the frequency of outages our customers experienced was within the first quartile target. However, the total duration of outages they had experienced last year had ticked over. So 98 minutes was the total duration on average. The target to meet first quartile was 90. And that was largely a result of the weather and storms that we experienced in 2025. And I'll go into more detail there, but we had 4 total declared events where we had to activate our storm response throughout the year. I can say, and while the major event days may be excluded, there are days adjacent to that. So think when we're still at the end of recovery, you have a couple hundred customers out of service. That's still in the metric. And then there's the days and weeks that follow. You'll find things like tree limbs that are hanging in the lines that cause an outage later. I can also say that as of now, that has ticked back under. So the 12-month rolling average is back in first quartile performance, with last March rolling off of the metric and the current year being a little more in line with what we usually see. On the generation fleet, good enough. I could talk about it, but the generation fleet, it was over the target. So we landed the year at about average for the industry, but above our mid-second quartile target. So mid-second quartile would have been 10.5%. We're at 17%. That one's continued to be a challenge, and we'll go into that a little deeper in the coming slides. and we'll start with generation. Before I dive too deep into the troubles, I do want to highlight a couple areas of improvement that we've seen. So in the last, I'll go with 5 years, but the last several years, we've been focusing really heavily on performance when it matters. Surely everybody around the room remembers some of the financial and the customer impacts of the winter storms we've experienced in 21 and 2024. And you can see in this chart, there's been a significant improvement. In 2026, we had another extreme cold event. It says 87%, and it looks like, man, there's still 13% missing. What I can say there is it really was a non-event from the internal experience. Our generation performed as needed. The missing piece there is Cass County. And by the time we've executed the dual fuel conversion on that unit, that number comes to nearly 100%. It was, we had some trouble with the newer units, but near flawless performance from the fleet. And I was really happy with that. So performance where it counts. The other chart you're looking at there is the blue bars are the total number of starts on our fleet. And the purple line is the starting reliability. And this chart goes back to when we joined SPP, the integrated marketplace. So we went from us making the decisions on which units we start and when, which you get some control and some lead time on when those things are going to happen, to SPP telling us, hey, we want you to start these units now. And you can see that transition. You see the increase in number of starts, the increase in pressure on them, and how the reliability started slipping. Again, this is an area we've had a focus. We put a lot of effort into reviewing every failed start, what caused it, and driving those out. Put a lot of effort into overhauling the units and investing in our combustion turbine units. In fact, over the last 5 years, all of our combustion turbines have had an overhaul except for Sarpy County 3. But that's paid off. In 2024, we had the highest starting reliability we had ever had. In 2025, it ticked down a little bit. That came with some of the growing pains that we've seen with our new units. But it also had the highest number of starts we've had to execute across the fleet ever. So both of these are in areas I wanted to highlight where concerted effort was made for performance when it matters, and it has paid off. Now we'll talk about the harder side of the story. Next slide, please, Aaron. So E4 is below target and running right around the industry average. There's a couple of ways to look at this. Typically, if you look at equipment, you get to learn what you already know, the things that have caused you to go offline. Turbines, boilers, electrical equipment, you get all the usual suspects. So we need to dive a layer deeper, and that's what we've done. And this over the last 5 years is a breakout of the major contributors to our forced outages. And you'll see in there, we've listed asset management. What that really is there was a piece of equipment that failed that could have been detected or an investment could have been made earlier. Now, that's a hard look in the mirror. Obviously, I'm standing here as the director of asset management, but it has the benefit of hindsight, but it's something we have to do to really think through what do we have to do programmatically to increase our performance. The other contributor is human performance. That's where our action, somebody operated a valve, took an action, and that ultimately caused a forced outage. Those two things together comprise most of where our recoverable or our improvement is available over the last 5 years. In 2025, there was a switch. Human performance was the larger driver. For the 4 prior years, it had been the asset management or the programmatic efforts. Now, I will note that for any forced outage cause, parts availability has started to creep in there as well. So supply chain, you can imagine if you're offline and you need turbine bearings, those aren't sitting on the shelf and they're getting increasingly harder to get a hold of. So you might be off for another several weeks waiting for the repair to get the new parts that you need. So that's kind of showing up in the metric, but it's not its own measurement. But together, this represents the areas for improvement. And on this, we've partnered with EPRI to study both of these areas. And what they've come back to us with is largely they found some strengths and weaknesses, and we were on the right path, but they had suggestions on how to accelerate that. So we'll be adding some key positions for reliability engineering, looking at some critical spares, and really trying to accelerate some investments, things we know we need to do, but getting them done sooner so we can get ahead of an outage or a potential outage. That's easier said than done. Outage windows are getting a little hard to find, as is the skilled labor and the technical support necessary to to actually execute it. So it's going to take some time to see all of that. The next slide, please.
Yeah,
Aaron.
question.
Yep, please.
So of that 60%.
Yeah.
Can any of that be credited to delays that were done in maintenance with the reduced budget last year? Austerity measures put in place that delayed some maintenance actions. Did any of those delays directly correlate to some of these outages?
There's a little bit there, yes. North Omaha Unit 4, I'll call out specifically. In 2025, we delayed the replacement of the function superheaters on that unit. That's an area that we know we need to make an investment in, and it does show up as tube leaks, and it did there right at the end of the year. And
Tube leaks tend to be small.
they do. They do. It tends to be cumulative over time. So yes, we can point to specifics. It's not the largest part of that 60%.
I would say we've changed the philosophy of, it used to be almost, what do we think the value of the asset is in the market? And can we create a business case based upon that market value that says, yes, you should replace this? Now we've moved to more of a life cycle maintenance standpoint of how long should things last? When we do inspections, what are we seeing in that space that shows we have more risk? What things do we want to have spares for? The sparing piece is a big deal. I don't know if you have stats on that, but like weeks and weeks and weeks and maybe a couple months on the last couple of years, we've seen outages
I don't
impact
have stats queued up, but yes, I can,
from
one of
just
them I could
that
point to.
piece of it. But it's a change in philosophy that I think is really going to do us well over time. I talked about earlier data and analytics and inspections and databases that this team has created over the past, 5 years roughly, that put us in a much better place than we were historically.
And the other one is also the change in policy. With SPP, you have now performance-based accreditation standards, where it's not just you have a certain unit with certain technology, you get accredited no matter what. Now, is the unit available when it's called upon? So taking into account the asset life cycle of the asset, because the better score we get, the better accreditation.
And we had years of no rate increase, which we were managing costs, right? And the way you manage costs is you back off on maintenance. So we saw that.
Yeah, it's getting aggressive, right? The shift has been from, I would say, least cost, most justified projects to what does it take to get reliable, right? That's the shift we've been working through. Performance-based accreditation, as Javier pointed out, is basically designed to drive us to that too.
I think EPRI also gave us some good focus on human performance activities and how we can improve our procedures and processes and training and things of that nature to sharpen the skill sets of employees even better. So if you're in a nuclear facility, everything is very detailed. Everything, like every step you take, it's very detailed. Other types of generating facilities, less so. And so we're really working hard to create. In fact, all of my folks that are in that space have key accountabilities now to make sure that we're producing better, more improved, easier to use processes and procedures for our operators. Because they're complex machines, like, just one valve that you talked about caused oil not to get to the bearings, and then we had the bearing fail. So simple things like if we have really good, crisp process procedures and someone checking your work before you actually actuate something.
Yeah, the mispositioning of a valve that I could hold in my hand contributed over 5.5% to the total E4 for last year.
Should we have digital twins for the major systems?
We been working really hard the last few years for additional. You're talking about like twins from a software standpoint or from a hardware standpoint?
Well, a digital twin model, so they could test if I close that valve, here's the impacts.
Yeah. So we have simulators at our coal facilities. Some of them are old. We've been upgrading those. I think that there's a different focus on training that needs to happen, and a deep discussion in that particular space. And so Ryan Gertz, which I know you've met, has been working on that last year and a half or so, and we see a lot of movement.
Yeah, I want to be cautious on human performance, not to make this about the action an employee took, but it's really the processes, the procedures, the way they're set up for success. And one other pressure that's happening here as we expand our fleet of generation, we have operators that may have worked at, in the past, you'd have equipment operators in Nebraska City for 10 years. Well, these equipment operators are moving out to other stations to staff the new stations. So your overall tenures are getting shorter at each of the stations.
Let me add to that too. Like, what's kind of unique is nearly every single generator we have is completely different than the others. So there's no standardization whatsoever in that space, except for the new ones that we are now building, which we are trying to use a similar platform. That was another thing that was brought up, you know, as we looked at this, like if you're training on multiple different pieces of equipment, you can't use just lifetime experiences. You really have to have things trained on in a different way than maybe we have historically, where we've had employees who worked for the company for 30 years in one location, so they have that tribal knowledge. We don't have that now. You know, we can't even hardly hire somebody with experience in the generation stations. We tend to bring them out of college and develop them because we have that. You know, I'm a little off topic here, but I'm just telling you, there's a concerted effort to try to improve in this area, but it will take us a while.
Even with the best of these things, when you brought on 11 new shafts. And a lot of times those operators don't have runtime on those assets. Those operators have to learn the assets. They have to learn how they react, what they're prone to, what they're not prone to. And that's an industry thing when you bring new assets on, is there's an acclimation period with those colleagues of ours getting connected with how the assets.
Currently, it's about 5 years when we bring somebody in before they're quite talented at those. So we're trying to figure out how do we cut that in half? Because that turnaround is just too long.
And I add in the space of the digital twin. So we have had some conversation as we look to Powering the Future 2050 and some of the milestones. So Troy and I have exchanged on some of that, looking out into the future. And as we look at what we're doing from an AI perspective, where does that become viable for us to ingest as a technology? So it is out there in the space of what we're doing, and seen some demos of other organizations that are using it quite effectively in the oil industry and some other. I think we're aligned in that path of how to get.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, real quick on this slide. So we've talked a little bit in the committee, and I had comments last year about the way the data is presented. The breakdown between asset and human, this is a new type of data, correct?
Yes, this is a layer deeper than looking at, say, turbines, boilers, and equipment. This is kind of that, what is the common cause behind it?
Yeah.
Right? What was the intervention that could have prevented this? So yes, this is different.
So last year's report included the last few years tracking on each of these metrics. I'm glad to see new data available. Do we have retroactive data? I thought I heard you say that this has changed over the last 5 years, and that this is the 5-year number, and that we do have data for each of the years broken down to reflect asset versus human.
Yep.
Okay.
Yes, yeah, we do have that in the 5-year trend. We had to go back to basically categorize all this to get the trends you're seeing here, to get the donut charts you're seeing here.
Yeah.
There was a lot of work to be able to categorize the human performance piece, because GADS captures just failures. And so that's something the team's been working on for a while to get to where we're at.
Yeah, so that's where I was going, was glad to see it. I appreciate the more detailed look rather than just the single number that was in the report in the past. I find the time series data, like we talked about earlier, for financial performance very helpful. So maybe we can look at that again for next year's report of how have we done in these different areas, because specifically asset versus human last year, I heard you say changed substantially to, there was, it sounds like, one particular human incident that led to a very disproportionate amount of impact.
Correct.
So understanding what has happened there over time, I find very helpful in the way that we view these reports and understand we have identified an issue, we have taken steps to correct it, and here's how we expect performance to improve in the future.
Okay.
So again, very glad to see this type of new data available. Kudos to spending the time to go backward and collect that. And looking forward, I hope we can, kind of track that over time so we can see how are we improving in these areas as we do different types of data collection and then adjust our processes. Specifically, SPP's policy change leading to performance-based accreditation, leading to different both monitoring and actions on our side was really well reflected in that graph of starts versus, previous slide, I think, starts versus reliability of starts. That is great. I love to see that information. That's very helpful. So again, thank you for spending the time to collect this new type of information. And I'm looking forward to seeing how we continue to improve it and looking forward, future monitoring reports reflecting how have we done over time as we have more specific data available.
Sure.
Although we're not happy with the performance of our generation, it is at what would be considered average for the industry. For whatever that's worth, we always strive to be better than that, and we'll continue to strive to be better than that. I think it's the focus on when it matters has been a big deal for us. Making sure that the assets are available during the extreme events is super important. You have less cushion in those times. The team's done really well on that, and something new that we've started is if you walk around a plant, you'll see statistics posted just about everywhere to make sure that there's more alignment. We're drawing clear connections to the work that somebody turning a wrench does and what that means to the reliability metrics.
Middle slide after distribution reliability, where we actually have the donuts. Bring it forward a little bit. 2 more forward. Okay. Pivoting around to the distribution reliability. There's a lot going on this slide, but what we're bringing to life here is what's driving the outages that our customers experience. The donuts you're seeing across the top, the 89, the 7, and the 4%. Those are all the proportion of the total customer experience, including major event days. I had said earlier that there were a lot of storms in 2025, and when you bring those into the mix, it turns out the metric is much, much higher than just the 90 minutes. And when you peel back the layers of that, you find out that's driven by trees and weather. And really, a lot of it is trees impacting our systems during weather. The next line below that is the breakout without the major event days. So the order of them really still stays the same. Trees and weather are the dominant factor. Equipment and cable start showing up with a measurable impact. And then on the far right, you have other impacts, so say public, wildlife, things hitting our system. The theme to take away from it, though, is that the primary area of focus is on the trees and the impacts of our system. That's driving the work we're doing. So in 2025, we had requested and this board had funded an increase in funding for our tree trimming. That had made a difference. We actually had some positive calls from some customers that lived in some heavily forested circuits that were surprised at how much improvement they've seen, but there's more work to be done. We're kind of recovering from an era of, I'll say, operating lean, I'll say in the mid 20 teens where we had pulled back here. It was kind of that same conversation of where you can save money. But now we have to make that back up. And some of the other things we're working on, hardening the system, doing some targeting undergrounded, that's pretty small because there's often not enough financial incentive to make that happen. It just doesn't give the return. The other area that we are excited about is distribution automation. So limiting the number of customers that are exposed to an outage and being able to more rapidly detect where that's at and get it corrected. It's kind of the big, broad groups of areas we're working on there. I do have one positive note to share. The cable and equipment failure area, that is down 30% over the last 5 years. So when you talk about time series data, Director Williams, it's kind of that reflection. It has been improving as a result of some targeted investment.
Hey, Director Bogner, if you remember, there were some subdivisions that were having issues and you're hearing much less about the cable related issues now because we did the analysis, we targeted a particular type of cable that was put in at a certain time. We had about 1,000 miles of it, I think, roughly. And within a year or so, we'll be complete, I think.
Yeah, we're about 2 years out from being
taking that all completely out of our system. So it's those focused programmatic areas that are making a difference. But we definitely still have some area to go with trees and a hardening effort.
That's where I'm excited about the new systems that have come through with AMI in these last couple of years. The information, right? Knowing what specifically is failing, how it's failing, allows you to take a targeted approach like Troy just called out there. Otherwise, if you're trying to go after 250,000 transformers, that's not very targeted.
So on this slide, related to data collection, I want to share appreciation because last year during the report, I asked specifically if we could have data that did include major event days, which is the top line now. So thank you for collecting that and making that available. And I think the comparison between the 98 minutes that we saw earlier and the 558 minutes that is shown here is an indication of why I thought that would be informative. A majority of the outages that are experienced by our customers are driven during major event days. And so while that is not the industry standard way to report safety and safety, I think it is still informative for us in policymaking, especially because we received a recommendation to increase vegetation management and we put additional money into that and it led directly to positive results. And so I think that that type of data and decision-making and results for our customers is absolutely critical to our success going forward. And this feels like a big success in that process. So thanks again for making that available. Just to make sure we're understanding this correctly, the donuts are the breakdown of the impacts by those three categories that do include major event day disruptions.
Correct.
Basically telling us that trees and weather, meaning storms, cause a majority of the outages. And then the line below that, the colors but non-donuts excludes the major event days.
Correct.
Okay, because this is something.
Generally, not all years have that many major event days excluded. I don't know if you know off the top of your head how many came in 2025, but
I know we had four
we had
declared
four pretty
events.
big storms, which was kind of a unique year. So that's why you have a much higher number.
2024 had none. 23 high, 21 or 22 and 21 were low.
So
It tends to be
it's not
kind of
every
spiky,
year.
but yes, I do appreciate that call out.
Yeah, and there was a more specific type of sensitive data that we reviewed in the previous month. I think last month in systems, I believe we looked at a chart that was over time that included and excluded major event days. And there was extreme spiky nature of the times when we have 4 major events in 1 year. Of course, the number goes up a lot. But again, I think that's very informative to what types of actions should we take so that if we receive a recommendation of the best bang for our buck for helping our customers avoid the negative impacts is additional vegetation management. By all means, let's get to the data that justifies that type of an investment. So when we get to the end of the year and the COP recommendation, we can say this absolutely is driving positive results and our customers know it.
Yeah, and I just want to highlight, I think vegetation management is the faster, lower cost option, but ultimately we are undergrounding additional miles every year. But we have, what's the total?
6,500-ish, 6,500 overhead miles.
Overhead miles left. So I think we're roughly 60% overhead distribution as an example. We're trying to chip away at that, but it's a lot of miles to try to underground a lot of that. So we'll probably want some targeted programs at some point in time. You may see us ask for even more vegetation management money next year. Or if you look at the trends, we want to start getting ahead of the growth rates, and that's the piece we're not quite ahead of yet. It's the growth rates. And if you all remember a couple of years ago, we started to invest in it's a type of satellite imagery that looks at growth rates across all of our service territory. And that gives us a much better look of how growing or not growing, what the highest risks are. And we've got some
segment by segment, you're able to see how fast the trees are encroaching on your lines. Gives you a much sharper set of data for me to say, yes, I'm confident we're not keeping up. So.
And directors, as a reminder, there was one additional data point that we talked about on another topic, the local electric grid planning presentation that we saw in committees that talked about locations with disproportionately high distribution system impacts, had a map and highlighted one circuit in particular that we later determined had been several more years than anticipated since the tree clearing had been completed. That has now been completed, and we expect significant positive results from that action. So again, I think this data is very important for us to both have and then for us to use in policymaking and in funding at the end of the year with the COP. So I guess this is all to say, thank you for making more of this available to us and presenting it to the public so that we know this is what drives the type of things that people in our customer satisfaction surveys would say, keep the power on, keep the bills affordable. In that first category, this is information that helps us know how should we do that. And we are taking steps based on that data to get to those positive results. So again, I know I've talked about this a lot, but since last year, I think this is a big improvement in the way we're seeing the report. And I just want to thank everybody for putting that together. And I think it is leading directly to very specific positive benefits.
think there was one question, I can't remember if it was in a pre-committee or if it came up in our session last year about transmission contribution to the distribution SAIDI. We did research that. In 2025, it made up almost no contribution. 0.1 minutes of total SAIDI came out of transmission cost outages. So wanted to make sure I got that stat in there as well. All right, last slide, please, Aaron.
And to be clear, there are regulations that require you to trim so far back that no tree can possibly fall into the transmission.
Well, it's a credit to system design, right? Multiple transmission paths to a substation, multiple ways to feed a circuit. So absolutely the way the system is built is working there. All right, so the summary, I'm proud of how 2025 turned out in light of all the storm challenges that we had. At the year end, over half the measurements were met. After we've rolled off some of the major events of last year, we're back down and it's only generation still needing recovery. We do have a path there. It is going to take some time. And I guess with that, I'll turn it over to the committee chair for a recommendation.
Great, thanks very much. The recommendation here is reasonable and appropriate measures, not fully compliant or sufficiently compliant. So I think that reflects that we know there are specific metrics, and the summary of green, yellow, red is what led to the committee making this recommendation. I don't know if any other directors on the systems committee want to share any thoughts about how we came to this recommendation, or if directors not on the systems committee have any thoughts about this recommendation or the data we've seen today. Everybody good?
Makes sense.
Okay. Again, thanks very much for the new type of information, and I look forward to continuing to refine the way that this is presented so we can understand trend lines and how are we doing. When we take actions, are those actions leading to positive outcomes for our customers? And I think this is a good example of, yes, we are using data to inform policy and funding, and that's driving results.
If you all remember, these slides used to be about 30 deep.
Yeah.
So I'm glad we're able to bring it and drive the focus so much better at this point. Thank
Well,
you.
I want to build on what Eric is describing. I think in my experience doing this for 10 years, I think there's a risk that the board has of not understanding where we're performing well and where the opportunities lie, right? I've definitely been involved in situations, I'm going to name them as like historical going way back, where the presentation is sort of all focused on the great things that we've been doing to drive improvement. But I really appreciate the way in which you provide a really balanced observation of how things are going. That helps us, to Eric's point, think about like COP and what kind of investments are going to be necessary in the future. So I just want to thank you for the tone and tenor in the presentation of it. It's not just rainbows and lollipops, right? It's like an honest observation of how things are going, which I think helps us quite a bit. I think it's really well done.
And as far as reflections, Troy, to your point, or Craig, your point, we have had very significantly detailed presentations in the past, and perhaps there is a way that we can have systems committee slides that include some more data that we may not need publicly, but is important for directors to see, or at least have access to. So maybe some of that time series stuff is not totally appropriate to have publicly displayed. This year's numbers are relevant publicly, but in order to have access to that, to see how are we doing over time, perhaps we can have more slides in the committee presentation that don't end up presented here. That's just one thought of how we might be able to have access to that information without having to bog down and, let this item run significantly over time. Sorry, Director Core. Like something we could talk about next.
I'm a big fan of an appendix for stuff like that. Yeah, I think it's really great.
I think with that, we're at the end of that item. Yes.
Thank you. And we're still with Troy for
Yes, we have one more. We have a labor contract, and I have Brian Kramer here. He's our Senior Director over Construction and Maintenance, and his team kind of picked up the process of selecting and managing contractors. We had a different construct before, and so here's Brian to present.
Yeah, essentially what that did is it aligned internal construction with external construction, so it's all under one group. And it's worked out really well. So, but I have had some things to learn, and I get to present to you guys today as a result of that. So RFP 6235 is really a labor contract. It's a contract for undergrounding distribution systems in our new commercial and residential development areas. So you can expect about 50 of these a year. Of course, that ebb and flows with the economy and what the developers are doing. About 35 miles of backbone per year get installed under this type of contract, if, for perspective there. One thing I want to point out is next month I'll be coming to you guys again for a similar contract, and I want to make sure that we know the difference. This is for that development space, that residential and commercial. Clint talked to it with Troy there about, replacing some of that nasty cable that's causing us that issue. We've got 2 more contracts out there that we use that bring us the ability to replace that cable, as they said. And then that's both in the metro and the rural. We intentionally separated those because it would get to be too big a contract. We might not have that competitive or those options, for smaller vendors to bid on this. So this is a 3-year contract. In this contract, we did add a clause extending 3 times for 1 year apiece. That's been our history with this. This is the 3rd time we'll be going to this kind of contract. It's worked very well for us. So we did advertise this in February. We're here today, or we opened up the bids in March. We're here today to give our recommendation for a vendor here. I will call out, though, we had just 2 bids. And I say just 6 years ago, there was many more. We would expect 3 to 5. That's an indication of what's going on with the economy here in Omaha and maybe around, even nationally. There's just the labor to the volume of work. We're seeing that internally, finding the resources. We spoke to that earlier. They're having the same difficulty of finding the resources to do this work. So the other thing we did was a really nice shift for our customers at our customer request. They asked for the ability to self-perform some of this work. What that allows them to do is maybe be a little more in time or in line with their schedule, maybe some efficiencies and maybe some advantages to their opinion. So essentially, instead of OPPD outsourcing the work and hiring a contractor, our customers are hiring the same contractors that we would have used. So those contractors that were doing the work are still doing the work. They're just getting a paycheck from somebody different. So with the 2 bids, you hope they're always, technically and legally, good when you get them and responsive. Steve's team has recommended that one is not. While they were both technically responsive, one was not legally responsive. It was just some timing issues on their submittals and really the completeness. They didn't finish everything in time. The good news is that this contract, the lowest bid, and in my opinion, in our opinion, team's opinion, is the best bid was from Nielsen Construction. They've estimated this cost for a year would be around $2,390,000, for this type of contract. Again, higher volume, we'll end up paying a little more. Lower volume in that customer space, we'll have a little less expense. One thing I want to point out with Nielsen is they are the incumbent. They've been doing this work for us for 14 years. So they're very good at what they do. We've had very good success with Nielsen. We're very excited to see their competitive bid at that, $290,000. So any questions?
I think it was responded to a little bit here, but that's a wide difference between Nielsen's bid and the competitor's bid. And was a little jaw dropping. So.
Yeah, it was for me too, being new in this space. What I'll say is being the incumbent, they actually know the work better than we do. So they know what they're bidding on. So that was one advantage to Nielsen.
They have the crews already established.
They already have the crews. Remember I talked to the labor piece, and this is kind of high input costs if you consider the equipment that's needed. This is a lot of trenching work, a lot of boring work. We think the other bidder would have to acquire some equipment, some investment to get that to be returned. So.
Thank you.
The other kind of wonky thing we see in sourcing now is there's areas of the economy that are hungry for work. And so especially in this type of service, they may give you a bid that is way high. I'll do it for that, but otherwise I'm not really interested. And so occasionally we see aspects.
We're seeing that. In fact, the other proposal here, they are actually, we actually have them on other contracts. So it clearly said we're probably not as interested in that type of work.
We've seen that a lot the last 1.5 to 2 years, I would say. Pretty wide response.
Again, the mass amount of work that's out there, you can pick and choose of where your niche is, and then they become successful, and that's kind of where they grind into. So,
and many of the companies who had historically bid, you don't see them playing in this right now because they're fully subscribed.
So they're offering you the respect of returning a bid, but I forgot that page.
So on that note, have we worked with Valley on this type of work in the past?
I mean, we have
similar work. in the groundwork, duct work. Yeah, they're building out some circuits for us now currently. That's correct.
But we believe that maybe they are just not as hungry currently and they don't have the direct experience with this specific type of work.
Just remember, there's speculation there. Nielsen's the incumbent. They have all the material, they have the people, they have the equipment. So that right there is a pretty big.
Yeah, the labor they have currently to do the other type of work is probably a little more technical and complex. This is a different labor market to do this work.
Got it.
For clarity, my comments are general, not respective of a certain bid.
For me, just looking at the economy as a whole, and I'm very pleased with the results here. A little concerning that we only got 2 and that you get such a big price difference. But that tells me labor scarcity is real. And we're talking about these in an environment where mortgage rates are still pretty high. And as those interest rates eventually come down, you're going to see a lot more activity on housing construction, which is going to take away even more labor. And it's going to make the pinch for labor even more visible for us. So I hope I'm wrong, but I'm a little concerned when I see this trend happening in this economic environment. And I think it's all pointing to labor. There is some input pressure, but it's my experience, it's labor.
I think all indications point to that. Our major project groups, the high skill projects, labor has been a challenge. Internally for me, hiring, finding the right resource, maintaining that employee has been harder to do than ever before.
But I'll ask this question acknowledging that it's certainly not specific to this, but I am curious. And I also want to name that I'm asking this question and it's grounded in my personal jaded experience of responding to RFPs. I think I'd just be curious about how we're thinking about and ensuring that we're leveling the playing field as much as we can when it's time to go to market, so that there's not an incumbent bias or a version of somebody who helped us think about the scope of work that has an advantage in the RFP process. I'm not suggesting that's the case, but certainly in terms of how we approach the market, how we put potential scopes of work in front of vendors, especially at the size and scale in which we're doing this. I'm always going to be interested and a fan of wanting to ensure that we have a really solid process that the market can look at and go, okay, I understand the scope of work, and I feel like I actually have a shot at the work, as opposed to an insider who's got the inside track from one reason. Again, I've got a jaded view of this process. That's not a commentary of anything OPPD has done. It's my professional view, but so I don't know if there was a question or an observation there.
I think something that I'd reflect on, and supply chain is Brad's group, but after these RFPs, there's usually touch points, conversations, and if you remember, you heard Brian say just a little bit ago, we kind of broke this up so that we could go out, and so smaller companies could have a better chance versus a very large one. So I think you have that in space now. There's no collusion going on. Let me first say that. So we look at the scope of work. A lot of it's driven by what the customer group kind of forecasts for the next year. We look at our internal resources and then say, where do we need to flex? And that's where we go into a space like this. And so we go out to the market with a packet. And again, we used to get, 6 to 10 in some cases, and now we 2 to 3 seems to be pretty good on anything we put in the market these days.
Yeah, I failed to introduce Katie Brenneman in the back. She's the specialist around this contract, management and construction services here. And I imagine she's just like chewing on her lip, wanting to inject here. But what I've noticed about this group, being a kind of an outsider and always been focused on internal, and now having the outside, responsibility of outside resources, is that there's touch points, there's opportunities, there's letters of clarification. We actually meet them on property face to face and allow people to walk through. Like, what are you talking about? What's this mean? We've made some adjustments that way or made ourselves available. What I'll say here is there was only one letter of clarification even requested. They clearly to me indicated they just weren't as highly interested in this contract on this particular one, but I'm with you. I don't have a jaded view of this yet, but I'm new to this and I'm learning. And I truly want to say, I think we're honoring and being truthful with this process. So.
Thank you.
And Director Moods, let me just add, over a really long period of time, the supply chain management group and our team have worked really, really hard to avoid just what you're talking about for both business reasons and legal reasons. Business reasons, meaning you want as many people in competition as you can possibly get. On this one, maybe not so much, but others, even this year or as recently as last year, we've seen, good responses on sealed bids. But really on the legal side, this board doesn't want a legal challenge saying, the fix was in, this was biased, and we've had virtually none of those over the decades that I've worked in this industry. So I don't know if that's just luck, but perhaps it is, but I think it's just rigor more than anything else.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Steve. Thank you.
So there was one other point you mentioned there, and just looking backward a little bit, from August of 24, we had an update about the development improvement update is what it was called. And it was a change in our policy about residential development installation, including allowing developers to contract and self-perform some of this work. Do you want to talk a little bit more about how effective is this at meeting those objectives? Because that was a point that I think we all received pretty significant feedback on leading up to those process improvements. So this is now the outcome of making that change, right?
I'll see if I can answer it to your, liking here, but definitely we heard loud and clear from the customer group. That was a wish of theirs. I think they had the idea that they could perform it better, quicker, be more efficient and cheaper. What we're hearing through our customer engagement meetings that we have quarterly that Tim team sets up is they're challenged with labor, they're challenged with schedules, they're challenged getting it done as efficiently as they thought they could do it. So the costs maybe are even a little higher than maybe what they were anticipating. So what that tells me is that the way we were performing was good. The process was good. Who we were hiring, the oversight by Katie's team was good. But on the other hand is that was a request of theirs. Will they ever reverse that or change that? But that hasn't had an impact on this, right? There's less volume of work here for this this company to do this.
Okay. And again, this is just appreciation because we received stakeholder input. We made a process change. We allowed something new to happen. Right. Looking backward now, how did that work out? Turns out maybe they were asking for something.
Maybe I think they're in the phase of still learning by doing, if that makes sense. We are offering all the help we can, even though we're not involved, by saying, here's the proper technique. Here's how I would trench that. Here's how I would, this is where you can be more efficient. There's still us leveraging them to be successful. I think they'll get there. We had those same pain points too when we started with Nielsen, but we had to have our resources there saying, this is how we need to do it. This is how it's done. So I think they'll get there.
Okay. Well,
I think the advantages outweigh the disadvantages.
Again, appreciation.
Your point is listen, basic adjustments. We're kind of in a new market too, where the amount of demand was higher than we'd ever seen. So trying to find ways to meet the customer where they're at was something we were fairly successful in that space. And I'll tell you, we've also focused on the communications between us and them, and that's gotten a lot better. We have tracking mechanisms in place that we did before, all because of this feedback from stakeholders.
I appreciate you calling that out because that was the intent of me saying, a customer had requested us to self-perform. And so we listened.
I may add, just in alignment with everything that's been said, I may add just a bit of nuance for some of our developer and builder friends that may be listening. They approach this with a complex set of problems around cost, predictability of schedule, and timeliness of schedule. And thankfully, they approach this with those broad viewpoints and broad challenges. What we had to do is try to solve for a solution that worked for both builder developer interests and our long-term interests as well. So to be clear, if those friends were in the room today, they would not be saying a front lot ducted service was not what we were specifically asking for, right? It solved their issues and it solved our issues as well. As we've had that conversation with them. The ducted part gives them much more control and controllability around the schedule, to Brian's point, and that's been a good thing for them. The front lot part really helps us for the next 30 or 40 years, not be having to deal with pools, landscaping in people's backyards, when there's outages, et cetera, et cetera. So I got to the same place. Everything was said was accurate. I just wanted to offer that bit of nuance because it, to Brian's point, we are continuing through that learning curve of that implementation.
Yeah. And again, the reason I brought it up was we heard feedback, we took action, it went well. It was not exactly as the stakeholders had perhaps requested, but we are still taking actions to get positive results delivered for our community. And this is an example of moving forward on that. So again, thank you to everybody who was involved at that time. And let's not forget, we did something good in the past. And we're still doing more good things for those customers moving forward. Glad to see this RFP got a successful result.
All right, thank you. Mr. Fernandez.
Thank you, Chair Core. It is, it's not very common that I get to present this type of material back to back. If you remember last month, I talked about the appointment of general counsel. Today, I'm here to talk about the proposal to appoint Joni Wheeler as our new Vice President of Human Capital. Michael Purnell, who occupied that previous role, she left the organization in October of last year. And I took a little bit of time to think about the position, think about the needs of the district, organizational design, and got a lot of feedback from many parts of the company, including board members and others. And this is culminating into today where I am proposing to replace Michael's position with a very like position. The position really doesn't change, it's reporting to me with the same organizational structure. But I'm really grateful for the feedback I got and the time we spent thinking about the art of the possible and what are the needs for the district. We conducted a very thorough selection process, over 550 applications. Kudos to our talent acquisition team who had to go through all of those applications and filter the quality of applicants. It resulted in a pool of 6 finalists. We conducted in-person interviews, and one of them was a remote interview. After a number of interviews, we selected Joni Wheeler, who has since met with the executive leadership team, with members of the board and different smaller groups. Let me talk a little bit about Joni's profile. She's a very well-respected leader in the Omaha area. She most recently spent time at Blue Cross Blue Shield, Nebraska, as Executive Vice President of Strategic Talent and Enterprise Shared Services, coincidentally so in the same building. Prior to Blue Cross Blue Shield, Nebraska, Joni held several leadership positions at CoreLink, First Data Corporation, as well as system design and management roles for West Corporation. So a lot of time here in Omaha, the Omaha business environment. She believes in fostering a culture in which integrity, authenticity, empowerment, teamwork, collaboration, and fun. Joni spoke when we interviewed with her. It was very inspiring. She spoke about symphonic leadership. And that leadership style is really powerful concept for us, where you're bringing different leadership views into a symphony, right? You have people playing different roles with different perspectives, but all really rowing towards the same objective. I'm confident she will be a great addition to OPPD. She's very active in the community. In 2021, right after COVID, Joni saw the need and she founded Ignite Nebraska, which is a paid apprenticeship program dedicated to elevating untapped talent with access to highly skilled, high-paying, high-demand roles. She is very active in the community. She currently serves on the board of directors for ICANN, Boys Town National Board of Trustees, as well as the Ignite Nebraska organization I just mentioned. She is also part of a UNO, Women's Maverick Basketball Mentoring Program, and is a strong advocate for mental illness programs for children. Super accomplished leader. I'm very excited to present her candidacy to the board. Again, my selection for her as the Vice President of Human Capital. These will be up for board consideration on Thursday. And let's talk about salary, because that's part of the appointment of the board. The board's role here is to appoint her as an officer of the district and approve her salary. The salary range for the position didn't change. It's the same salary range we've had in the past. And the percent of midpoint, considering Joni's already lengthy career, especially in executive roles, my proposal, and really it's human capital's proposal, is to start her at a 92% of the midpoint, which is very similar to what we did with Mr. Fisher when we brought him in, acknowledging that Joni comes in with years of experience in an executive role, demonstrated leadership experience. That's really where it would be very similar to the positions that we have in the executive leadership team. You can see the salary here. The proposed salary would be $363,619. Just for context, the midpoint for that position is $395,238. So very close to that midpoint, reflecting 92%. If approved by the board, her starting date would be really here in the next couple of weeks on April 27th. And she's excited. She's ready to go, and I believe she will be present at the board meeting on Thursday. Should you have any more questions? Happy to answer any questions you may have.
I just like to say that I found her very engaging in our meeting. We sat down with her, very articulate, I mean, great engagement in the community. I mean, certainly as you laid out her resume, I mean, she's got just a fantastic resume, I think, for what we're looking for. So, you know, I look forward to having her here at OPPD as part of the executive leadership team.
Yeah, echo. I don't.
Yeah, I'll echo as well. I think my only concern or pause was that she didn't have any experience with unions or union negotiation, but we asked the question in the interview and she handled it really well. And so I think I have a high confidence that she'll be able to look at that growth as an opportunity and build those relationships with the unions.
Thank you. All right, any other comments or questions? Thank you. Next we have Ms. DeJure, please.
Good afternoon. I'm Michelle Desuri. I'm the Director of Corporate Audit. I am representing Scott Post today. He's out on vacation. So I just want to tee up the next topic here related to Standing Committee annual charter reviews and related board policy updates. Each of the standing committees has a respective charter. We do expect an annual review be performed. This year, the Finance, Governance, and Risk, as well as the System Management and Nuclear Oversight Committees have recommended some changes. Those are outlined in Exhibits A through D. Those are contained within diligent for your review. The updates require some unsubstantive updates to the board policies, and those are also redlined in Exhibit E. I'm going to defer over to Director Spurgeon. She's going to add some additional context to what those proposed changes.
Thank you, Mr. Jury. Just review, and for people who may be listening, trying to track what's going on here. The Customer and Public Engagement Committee reviewed their charter on January 5th of this year. Systems Management and Nuclear Oversight did the same thing on January 7th. Governance reviewed our charter on January 6th. Finance reviewed theirs on February 6th. And at that time, they noted wanted some changes made for purposes of clarification, very minor. The Risk Committee met on March 19th, and they were first chartered in October of 2024. So they haven't been in existence as long as the other committees. So after this, year and a third of existence, it was suggested that some of the SDs that were initially assigned to the committee be returned to where they'd come from. Governance Process 13, external auditor relationship, decided that would be just better send that back to the Finance Committee. SD10 ethics, return that to governance. SD6 safety. Now, this one has been on System Management's committee's desk for a long time, but they have a lot going on this year. So it was requested that the safety SD be moved to the Rest Committee so that the balance of labor is a little more equitable. So these are essentially minor changes, along with the hiring of internal counsel that necessitated a little change to one of the charters and so forth, and other documents that are affected. So the minor kind of house cleaning changes include striking of words that no longer apply, the new committee assignment of certain policies, a renumbering of pages, and finally recording on each policy the date when these changes are approved. So that's what you will see in the exhibits. You'll see a red line, a clean version, and a red line from whence it came. So hope that helps anybody who's following along and reading all the documents understand what happened. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have confirmation of our agenda for Thursday. Aaron, I'd like 12 and 13 pulled off of there, please. Do any directors want anything else moved to the discussion action items for Thursday?
This is a question. Should we move, I wonder if we should move SD5, number 9, in order for us to take an opportunity to provide some accolades for the top quartile.
Sure. I'd say, yeah, let's err on. I appreciate that. Sorry. Sorry to give you a sure for.
No, it's okay. I phrase it as a question.
Yeah.
You can say no.
No, I think that sounds great. So I don't see anybody opposing that. So
sure, can be taken a couple different ways, can it?
All right.
Sure.
I'm catching 9, 12, and 13. Anything else? All right. So before we adjourn, we'll take comments from the public on items of district business. Comments made by all parties during the meeting are a part of the official public record. We'll take comments in the room first and then via WebEx. Do we have any in-person comments?
We have one.
All right, great.
Oh, sure.
For in-person attendees, if you wish to make a comment, I'll call you to the public comment podium at one at a time. Please state your name, address, and the name of any organization or person you represent. Each individual will be allotted 3 minutes per matter pending. To assist you, we'll use the timer on the screen. Ms. Lane will signal you when 30 seconds remain, as well as when time is up. If you have written materials, please deliver them to Ms. Lane.
Thanks very much. My name is Scott Williams. I live in Lincoln on Rosewood Drive, though I still work here in Omaha. My work is in the energy industry, and while my comments are informed by my professional experience, I am not speaking on behalf of my employer. Specifically, I work day to day with solar installers, contractors, builders, and developers. As a matter of fact, I came to this meeting directly from a rooftop site visit for solar arrays that are being built next week. Recently, my work has also been with housing developers who are adding solar to their projects. I see this as a significant area of growth in the sector. It is these projects in particular that inform my comments today, though again, I'm not speaking on behalf of any clients, company, organization, or anyone. My comments are particularly related to 2 issues that have already been discussed during today's meeting, that is rates and reliability. The financial benefits of distributed solar generation are clear. The vast majority of ratepayers could buy kilowatt hours from a solar array on their roof for less than it costs the district to generate remotely and move energy through the transmission and distribution system. It's no exaggeration to say that solar energy is among the least expensive forms of energy ever available to humanity. In the 21st century, the cheapest way to get electricity is to point a sheet of glass at the sun. That is exactly why developers are looking to add solar arrays to their development projects. There are clear financial benefits to the ratepayer. There are also significant benefits to the utility. Blending the least expensive form of energy into the district's generation portfolio lowers the overall cost for all ratepayers across the district. Distributed generation can increase grid utilization, getting more value out of the wires we already have. On-site generation does not require T&D, which can help delay or defer infrastructure upgrade costs. Solar power is fundamentally different from other forms of generation. Once installed, solar arrays have nearly 0 operating expenses. The costs are all upfront capital expenses. The development timeline for such projects is measured in months, but the lifetime of the project is measured in decades. As you consider rate changes, I would encourage you to keep in mind the investments that have already been made, which are already creating benefits to the district. Rate changes that negatively impact the viability of projects which are already online and producing power could be a strong disincentive towards future investment. Distributed energy resources, including solar and battery storage, are well aligned with OPPD's mission to provide affordable, reliable, and environmentally sensitive energy to its customer owners.
30 seconds.
Beyond that, aggregated distributed energy resources, as described by President Fernandez, can benefit customers as individuals and benefit customers in aggregate as ratepayers of the public power district. The overall benefits are substantially increased when adding battery storage to distributed generation. The question becomes how to maximize the benefits and at the most affordable cost while ensuring the benefits are equitably distributed. Beyond reliability benefits to individuals, every minute there's not a grid service interruption, distributed batteries can provide significant benefit to the district. Through aggregation with a DERMS platform, batteries can be dispatched to reduce peak demand right when electricity is most expensive. As of now, there are not significant ways for the aggregate benefits of distributed battery energy storage to encourage solar builders to add batteries to projects and create those benefits for the district. As an industry, we are ready and willing to engage in conversations about opportunities to create additional benefits for the individual ratepayers and also for the district. Battery energy storage in particular has the opportunity to provide much more benefit than is presently being realized. I would look forward to continuing the conversation, realizing that 3 minutes is not sufficient time to cover this in depth. And I'm glad to answer any questions, but I look forward to talking about this more in detail in the future.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any other comments in the room? For WebEx attendees, if you wish to make a comment, please send the meeting host a message using the chat feature or utilize the hand raise feature. Detailed instructions can be found on the OPPD website at the link shown on the screen. When I call on a member of the public to speak, please affirm that we can hear you before commencing with your comments. Please state your name, address, and the name of any organization or person you represent. Each individual will be allotted 3 minutes per matter pending. To assist you, we'll use the timer on the screen and signal you when 30 seconds remain, as well as when the time is up. If you have written materials, please email them to corporatesecretary@oppd.com and they'll be received on our behalf. Ms. Lane, are there any comments online?
We do have a few, Colin Smith.
Sorry, you said Mr. Smith? Is that?
Smith, Colin Smith.
Okay.
Yep. Yes, Andrews.
Okay. All right, sir, if you can hear me, please go ahead.
He lowered quite a bit.
Okay.
David Corbin.
All right, sir, go ahead if you can hear me, please.
Hear me?
Yes, sir, go ahead.
Okay, I'm not sure what name they were calling, but this is David Corbin, Missouri Valley Group Sierra Club, 1002 North 49th Street. I heard a lot of good and interesting things at today's meeting, but given the time I have, I want to focus on what I didn't hear. I'd like to know more about what OPPD is doing to follow up on the Douglas County Health Department's letter to OPPD in reference to the North Omaha coal plant keeping to burn coal. Regarding the customer satisfaction, I mean, I've done a lot of social surveys and everything on my own or in my profession. And I wish that there was more breakdown demographically to see which group, maybe low income versus high income, what their satisfaction is. It's not clear what the sample size is or how they draw the sample. And so if you want to try to find out more of what residents think, you need to drill down a little bit more to see who's satisfied and who isn't. Regarding LD 1261, a lot of people were wondered why OPPD and other public power supported it so much without mention of transmission or the gas or the water usage or other concerns that we know about data centers, and in reference to the Flatwater Free Press article about the Google AI. How does this fit into SPP, which you're always telling us they don't let you do certain things? And what are the guardrails that other utilities are using that wasn't brought up in this particular bill? And then the impact for OPPD customers. When this happens, what will it be? I didn't hear any discussion of that. And finally, I'll end with what I do, and it kind of fits in with what Scott Williams said. On-bill financing. We talked about best practices in several of the presentations today and trying to figure out what you're doing. I still haven't heard anything about what you're doing about best practices of what other utilities are doing in terms of trying to have solar power or energy efficiency. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other comments online?
John Pollock.
Mr. Pollock, please go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
John Pollock, 1412 North 35th Street, Omaha. I'm talking today because I won't be there Thursday. First of all, I'd like to also say that I'd like to see coordination between the Douglas County Health Department, as outlined in their letter, and OPPD. Regarding your reliability overall, I'm encouraged that you're using satellite to look at where the trees are encroaching on the lines. I would suggest one further refinement to that if it comes to prioritizing tree work, and that is that if there's been a major weather event for that particular area, it takes trees a while to grow back. Most of the damage that's going to be done for a while has been done when a big windstorm passes through. You probably get those maybe once every 5 to 10 years on the average. So if you've got a place where trees are encroaching and there hasn't been a major windstorm in a while, that's probably the area that's the highest priority to get to, because there will have been the most regrowth to the point where it could be damaged. I would also like to recommend that somebody take up the possibility of a major summer heat wave. I was looking after the March heat wave, which, by the way, was at least a 4 Sigma event for the southwestern U.S. And it turns out that in the last 40 years, where statistically you would expect about 4 monthly records to be set or tied over the 40-year period for Omaha, we've had 7, and they were all in the winter months. The remaining months, which are waiting for their heat wave, are all in the summer with records over 100 degrees. Those were all set in the 1930s. So the next time we have a serious combination of drought and stagnant high pressure, we might see some of those taken out based on what we've seen so far and what happened back in the 1930s. I'd recommend you looking at what would happen if you had a week where the average low in Omaha was 83, the high was 108, and the record high for that period was 115. That only slightly exceeds what actually happened back in the 1930s. It could happen again. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other comments online?
No more comments.
All right, without any other comments, we are adjourned today at 1:32. Thank you, everyone.